Good morning, councillors, officers and members of the public. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Strategic Planning Board. I'm Councillor Stuart Gardner and I will be chairing today's meeting. I will begin by explaining some ground rules for those taking part in the meeting to follow. Please can you keep your camera and microphones switched off unless I invite you to speak. This is to ensure that only one voice can be heard at any one time, talking without interruption. Please forgive me, but I'm trying to read a screen and without a mouse attached to this computer. This also helps to avoid feedback and background noise and can save bandwidth. For members of the board wishing to speak during the debate or raise a procedural point, please your desire to do so by using the chat facility, which can be accessed via the information bar near the centre of your display. And I'm now going to turn mine on so I can see everybody. There we go. That's what I want on. Thank you very much. For members, right. Bear with. Present at today's meeting are members of the Strategic Planning Board. I intend to call their name one by one and ask them to switch on their camera and microphone to introduce themselves and confirm that they can hear the proceedings. Starting with Councillor Anthony Critchley.
Morning, Chair. I can see and I can hear.
Thank you very much, and I can see you too. That's fine. Councillor Steve Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. I can both see and hear.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ashley Farrell. Are we still having difficulties connecting to him? I'll come back to him at the end. Councillor Peter Groves.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can. I'm confirming that I can both see and hear.
Thank you very much, Councillor Groves. And Councillor David Jeffery.
Hi, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Steve Hogman.
Good morning, Chair. I can see and hear you. Can you see and hear me?
I can see and hear you. That's good. Right. Councillor Rob Morton.
Hi, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Okay. I can sim ditto. That's fine. And Councillor Patrick Redstone. Councillor Redstone.
I can.
Councillor Redstone, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm having problems with the controls. Yes, I can see and hear you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Redstone. Councillor Jackie Weatherall.
Yes, Chairman, I can see and hear you.
Thank you very much. I can see you. And Councillor Phil Williams.
Yes, Chair, I can both see and hear. Thank you.
OK, so I'm just going to check one more time. Councillor Ashley Farrell, are you able to connect?
He's not in, Chairman. We are working on it, and as soon as he manages to connect, I'll let you know.
OK, thank you very much. I'm just going to connect a mouse to this other computer so I can manage the script better. Thank you. That's better. Right, so also present are the following officers who are here to advise the board. Deborah Ackley, Principal Planning Officer with Enforcement. Sarah Baxter, Democratic Services Officer. Adrian Crowther, the Major Applications Team Leader. Nikki Folan, the Planning Solicitor. Paul Hurdus, the Highways Officer. Robert Law, the Planning Team Leader. David Malcolm, the Head of Planning. And I will explain now how the board will operate. The Planning Officer will introduce the item, show slides, photos and plans regarding the site. I will then invite any registered speakers to address the committee and ask them to switch on their camera and microphone, to state their name and the name of any group they are representing. I will inform them how much time they have to speak and that they must finish within that time, or their microphone may be muted to enable the meeting to move along. If anything the public speaker has said was unclear, I may allow members to ask questions of clarification. Once they have spoken to public speakers, they will turn off their camera and microphone and listen to the rest of the debate and decision. Now, on this point, if members of the board can please note, if they are supposed to ask questions of the public speaker, and the standing orders actually specify that that should only be in respect of things that they have been heard the speaker say. They should not be asking generic questions that they might ask to establish a view or opinion. The planning officer will respond to any issues raised by the public speaker, and then members will be able to ask the planning officer questions before moving to the debate. Now, this is where you ask your generic questions. I remind members to indicate in the chat function if they wish to speak during the debate. When the debate moves to a close, I will check whether the officers have any final advice to give, and then the terms of the resolution, which have been moved and seconded, are all clear. I will then invite each member of the board in alphabetical order to turn on their camera and microphone and confirm that whether they support the resolution or otherwise by saying for, against, or not voting. I will try today to remember to vote myself. The result of the vote will be reported to the meeting. Members of the board can only participate in and vote on an item if they can hear and be heard throughout. If a member loses their connection and is unable to alert this fact, the meeting may be able to adjourn for a short period to allow them to reconnect. If they are unable to connect within time, the meeting will continue without them and they will be unable to participate or vote in that application. If the live stream of the meeting fails, the meeting will be adjourned for a reasonable length of time to try and restore the connection. If it is not possible to do so, the meeting will be postponed to a new date. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and live to the public. We will now move to item 1, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, Sarah?
Yes, Chairman, apologies for absence from Councillor Hunter.
Thank you very much. Are there any specific declarations of interest? Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of openness and transparency, I am the Chairman of the Public Rights of Way Committee, who were consultees on all 3 applications. I haven't discussed or been spoken to about it. And also, I've had an email from Emery Planning, as I suspect everybody else has, regarding matters on 20/2925. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also have received that email and I will ask after who hasn't received it. Can I ask Councillor Councillor Hogman to speak, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In the interest of openness, in respect of the applications at 5 and 6 on the agenda, the 2 of them in Crewe, just making my usual declaration. I'm a non-executive director of ANSA, who've been consulted on the application, but I've not discussed the application or made any comment upon it. Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you very much. Councillor Hogman, while you're on, did you receive the email from Emery's?
Yes, I did. I think it went to all members of the committee.
I've noticed it's gone to all members and it's gone to Sarah. I've not responded to it and I only read the first 2 paragraphs. Right, so because I only saw it just before I was asked to chair this meeting. Right, so if we now move to I also have declaration of interest. I am known to the public speaker, Mr. Howman, in the 2nd item on the agenda, and also I am previously an employee of Emery Planning, and so I am known to Mr. Gascoigne, who is the author of the letter we've all received, but I don't believe it's him that's speaking in the item that today. It's a member of Emery staff who I'm not known to, so just for openness I need to declare that. Thank you very much. Are there any other declarations of interest? I'm noting that, so I think, Sarah, if you just put that we all received the email from Emery's, that's probably the best way to deal with that in the minutes, please.
Yeah, that's fine, Chairman.
Okay, right. So we'll now move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which took place on the 14th of October. Can I ask someone to propose that these are a correct record? And I have Councillor Edgar's has put his. So, Councillor Edgar, are you proposing that these minutes be approved?
I am, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do I have a seconder to that proposition, please? Councillor Groves. Councillor Groves, do you wish to second?
Chair.
Thank you very much. They've been proposed and seconded. I will now invite each member of the committee in alphabetical order to confirm their support or otherwise by stating for, against or not voting. And when members do so, please will they turn on their camera and identify themselves. Councillor Critchley.
Councillor Critchley, for.
Thank you very much, Councillor Critchley. Councillor Edgar.
For.
Councillor Farrell, is he with us yet? Sarah?
No,
right,
Chairman, still no sign.
Okay, I'm also for. Councillor Groves.
For.
Councillor Hogben.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Morton.
For.
Councillor Redstone.
For.
Councillor Weatherall.
For.
And Councillor Williams.
Yep, Councillor Williams, for.
Thank you very much. Public speaking time. This sets out the public speaking rule. That's what it says in the script, just so everybody knows. Unlike other meetings of the council, what happens with planning, for those of you who are watching on the live link, is that we invite the speakers at the beginning of each of the individual planning applications rather than at this stage during the meeting. So we'll now move to our first application, which is item 5, 19/1371N November. Outline application for the development of up to 400 residential units, use class C3, and associated infrastructure and open space. Land of Minshull New Road, Leighton, Crewe, for Mr. M. Thompson, Engine of the North Limited, though I believe Mr. Crowther will tell me in a moment that that's not, they've now renamed themselves something else. And I'm going to ask Adrian Crowther to present this item.
Thank you.
Over to you, Adrian.
Morning, members. Yes, you're quite right. The applicants have been brought in-house in effect now, and they are now part of our economic development, just for clarity. Okay, so just bear with a second, members, where I get to try and share my screen. Okay, members, can you just, sorry, Chair, can you just confirm that you can see that, please?
Yes, I can, Mr. Crowther.
Okay, so members, this is the first of 2 applications that run concurrently on the agenda today and are both part of the same area. So some of the things I'm going to talk about in this application will be equally applicable to the second application, and I'll explain as I go along the sort of linkages between the 2 applications. So the Chair introduce the title of the application, so if I move swiftly on. So this plan just literally shows the site edge red of the application, which is slightly relevant in that obviously it shows the extent of the application area and how it interacts with some other areas that I'll explain shortly. But in short, the application basically runs along Minshull New Road to the east here, for those of you who know the area. Leighton Brook, a watercourse, runs along the southern boundary of the site and disappears into a culvert along here. I'm assuming you can see the mouse on here. So there's a culvert line that runs through the bottom of the site here. And there are a series of pylons, and you'll see some photographs of these, that run across the site, effectively southwest to northeast, but outside the actual site area in this regard. Okay, so this is a Google image of the site just to kind of show its context. So the site that we're looking at with this first application sits approximately here. So it sits, if you like, right on the western border of Crewe. This obviously is the main built-up area of Crewe, and you can see here from some of the notions on here, we have Bentley Motors that sits immediately to the south of the site. So again, Leighton Brook runs approximately in this line here, but is largely culverted on the western side. So we have Bentley Motors and its sort of complex here to the south. We have the main Leighton Hospital complex to the north, and obviously residential areas immediately to the east in this area here. The areas you can see from the photograph is largely agricultural in character. There are one or two buildings, some sort of farmsteads and individual properties over, but they're all outside this particular site in question. Okay, so for context, the site forms part of Local Plan Strategy Site LPS4, and you can see the extent of that here. Again, this is part of the site. So the site we're looking at in this first application sits approximately in this area here, if you remember the site edge red. So it forms maybe sort of 20–25% of this allocation. The following application on the agenda then forms the majority of this site in this area here. The only bit that's not included is a small segment of land down in this bottom southwestern corner of the site, which is very heavily constrained. As I said beforehand, there is a watercourse flowing underneath in a culvert in this part of the site. There are the pylons that run across the site at this point, and a large area of this is a former landfill site. You'll also, members that were on the strategic board some time back, will also be aware that there is a master plan approved for Bentley, which includes some of this area within that as part of their master plan. So in other words, there are plans within that to expand Bentley at some stage in the future. So you can see the extent, and you can see that all of this site falls within strategy LPS4. Moving on. For context, some members may have been on the strategic board in approximately March, April of 2019 even, where the application for a road scheme was approved. This was referred to as the Northwest Crewe package, and is a series of highway measures within this area of Crewe. And you can see the extent of those on this slide. So again, I'll try and put some context on this. The site that we're looking at here overlaps in this area here. So it effectively divides the site into three areas. The one to the east that links up into Minshull New Road here onto the eastern side. One to the west, a small area here that sort of keeps outside the if you like, the wayleave of these pylons, and then an area in the south here beneath the road scheme. Now, clearly, there is a very strong linkage. This road scheme effectively provides all the access to these sites that we're going to look at today, or certainly the vast majority of the access to these sites we're going to look at today. So we need to see it in that context. And you can see here there are various mitigation works along there with various ponds, and there's obviously some various bits of landscaping that sit alongside these roads. So the main access was from Minshull New Road, from a roundabout at this point, through to another linkage here. And obviously then we have the north-south spine road that takes you right to the bottom of the outpatient. So obviously it's the main entrance into Leighton Hospital. For those of you who know the site, the accident emergency areas in here, and the main sort of outpatient units are all in this area of the hospital. So this is effectively the main entrance to the hospital. So just to set the context there, members, that the site that we're looking at, this first application, sits in this area and is divided by the road in those ways. Okay. So this is an indicative master plan of how the site could be laid out. Again, I'll refer to these three parcels. The parcel to the east, which is the main residential parcel. There's then a small parcel to the west that sits within this area here, and then there's the area to the south. And you'll see in a second that there's no proposal for any built development within that area, largely because, I said before, a large part of this site forms part of a former landfill. And obviously there are land stability, etc. issues associated with developing of that land. So the main area of development here is on the eastern side, and this gives an indication of the type of layout that could be achieved on the site. And you can see here clearly there's a series of interlinkages and roads, and the things that we're obviously interested in are making sure that there are through roads that allow you to link to the eastern side of the site, so that we have to maintain the linkages to Crewe, and that's obviously especially important for pedestrians and cyclists. This is a land use parameters plan, which sort of sits above that, if you like, and just sort of shows how that these areas are parcelled up. So it sets here, and you can see the code on. I think you've got these in your members packs. You've had a chance to have a look at those. I won't dwell on that slide. Okay. The next slide is a master plan, a landscape strategy, which effectively shows how the site would sit with the existing landscape features on the site, obviously taking into account the road scheme as built. And you can see here, you can see how the parcel is divided up, and you can see the existing hedge lines that run across the site where there's obviously a lot of talk in the report about how they are largely retained. There, frankly, members, are not many landscape features within this particular part of the site. There are two main hedgerows, but they run north-south along the main road frontage. And there's also one that sits approximately in this area, but unfortunately that would be removed as part of the road scheme. So again, it just gives an indication of what's there on the site and some of the constraints, and also shows the line of the public right-of-way that crosses the site here. Okay, so some photographs to set the context. This is a photograph taken immediately to the south of the site. This was actually done for the road scheme, so forgive it was taken some time ago, but nothing has changed in this area. So this is showing Leighton Brook down in the bottom of the dip here, so you can see the level change, and that's the main reason for the photograph really. This is the eastern boundary of the site, so this is Minshull New Road with existing residential development. You can see sort of circa 80s type housing on this side. This is the cemetery, which falls outside the site on the opposite side of the brook, and this sort of gives you sort of a context of the entrance to this area from the south of the area. Okay. This is photographs shown from the cemetery itself. Again, the site in question is in this area on the far side. So again, Leighton Brook sits in this in this cutting down here, and then at some point in here, it's difficult to tell from this photograph, disappears into a culvert underground. So you can see it. This is a sort of an open view from the south of the site. So you can see there's a dip here, but fairly soon the site starts to flatten out, and you'll see that better in some of these further photographs. This is a photograph shown the exact opposite way. So Leighton Brook sits down at the bottom of the slope here. So this is looking south. And this is Bentley Motors that sits on the horizon at this point here. So you can see the slope comes up, and then the site starts to flatten out. And this immediate area in the foreground here is approximately where the new roundabout would go at the southern end of this particular site as part of the road scheme. This is a photograph within the site looking immediately east towards Minshull New Road. Again, you can see that established hedgerow along the road frontage. And some trees within that line and opposite, and these are the relatively modern properties on Minshull New Road in the distance. A shot within the site looking up. This is sort of towards the southern end of the development parcel, and you can see there the pylons in the distance which fall outside this site, and you can see the sort of major cross-country electricity, and I forget the exact kilowatt, but they carry the sort of cross-country voltage as opposed to a sort of a local distribution. And you can see the site is relatively open with one or two scattered trees, and this is the hedgerow boundary on this side of the so that'd be the western side of the site. Again, another generic shot looking exactly due west. You can see the pylons again in the distance, just to get a snapshot of the height of these. And again, just to show the open sort of aspect of the site. And I think, members, that's pretty much pretty much the photograph. So just leaving that on there just for a second. I'll just put up the main. Let's put the landscape strategy back up. Just to pick up on a few points while I keep that slide on the screen. There has been a formal update from the the Lee Flood Authority, as referenced within the update report. We finally had the formal comments, and they are recommending 3 additional conditions. But for both applications, they're recommending the same conditions, so I shouldn't have to dwell on it for the second application. But just for clarity, there are 3 conditions they recommend. The first of which is for the Planning Commission to be carried out in accordance with the flood risk assessment that was submitted. The second one requires a detailed strategy and design limiting the surface water runoff from the proposed development. And the third one requires the discharge rates to be agreed with the Lee Flood Authority. You'll see in the report there is reference to 1 condition regarding drainage, and these 3 conditions would replace that 1 condition. Okay, just to pick up a couple of other matters. There is reference at condition 17 to a public rights-of-way management scheme. For those members that looked in detail at the public rights-of-way comments, they've also asked for a signage scheme in addition to that. So they wouldn't. So the condition 17 would need to include details of signage as well as the management of that particular feature. And members, I think the only other thing I need to refer to is there is reference in the report to a section 111 agreement. This has been discussed with our solicitor, and because of the ownership of the land, which is entirely within Cheshire East ownership, there is a concern that that is not legally the way to be in terms of ensuring that the payments are made, because effectively Cheshire East Council cannot form a legal agreement with itself. Normally a section 111 is applicable in the Local Government Act when we are a part owner of the site. So in this case, because we are the sole owner of the site, it would not be appropriate to enter into a section 106 agreement with ourselves. And clearly the reason for this, members, is should the Economic Development Department wish to sell this site on in the future, we need to make sure that the requirements of the contributions are all achieved. So in other words, we need to make sure that a 106 agreement would be signed. So what we are recommending now is that a condition is attached at the end of the condition list to require the developer to enter into a 106 agreement. This is not a practice that we would normally favour, but it can be done under the rules of in planning legislation in exceptional circumstances. And given that we are the sole owner of the site in this particular way, and this is the only way of achieving this particular method, we think it's entirely appropriate. So with that, members, I think that's me done for my presentation. So I shall try and close this down. Bear with me. Bear with me here, please, Chair. I'm just trying to remember how to actually close down the...
That seems to have worked, Mr. Crowther. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Crowther, can you turn your camera off now while we go to the next speaker, please? Thank you very much. Right, so I'm now going to move to the public speakers and for this item, and I will call first to Councillor Byron Evans, the ward councillor, to address the board. Councillor Evans, can you please switch on your camera and your microphone, and you will have 5 minutes to speak, after which you may be asked questions of clarification by members of the board. So, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you turn your camera on, please, Councillor Evans?
I can't, because it may well be because I'm not on the council computer.
Okay, I'm sure that's fine. We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, right. So right. You now have 5 minutes, and I will advise you if you exceed that time period. So
that's fine. Thank you. Right. Well, I'm Councillor Byron Evans. I'm the ward councillor for Leighton, which this application is placed, and I'm very concerned about the way that these developments have been taking place for over 30 years, where 500-600 houses have been put up onto the area. The offshot of that is that obviously the road network is suffering. There's been no actual development of any road, but the problem then arises is where the traffic is going to go. I think that's one of the big highlights here. The Bradfield Road, Minshull New Road, in particular, coming into the Crewe town, are going to be even more congested than at present. The actual problems that would cause again, there's a lot of difficulty with these roads because they are really inadequate. I think as well that the problem has been that you've got two sites now, this one and the one later in the agenda, going to be treated separately, and there's no proper linkage and that the development to join both these sites up as well. I don't know if it's been considered. There is talk about the change in the top part of Minshull New Road, where the school is, Leighton Academy is positioned. It's going to be very difficult, I think, to split that road and not have it as a thoroughfare. And the drop-off and particular traffic problems, I think, are going to be occurring there as well. I would hope that if it goes ahead, consideration be given to the footpaths. The idea behind what I was thinking was, rather than just signposts away, that they should have a proper footpath installed. I would refer perhaps some of you to about the Leighton Community Woodland, which has a hard path of like a gritty material, makes it feasible for people to walk, to take recreational exercise, don't have to rely obviously then on the weather with grass underfoot. So I think that's important as well. I'd like to ask about the outdoor and public open space, which I gather is a private management code on page 37. I'd like some information really, what does that mean? Because at the moment, flow homes are building along Parkers Road and Flowers Lane, an estate there, which seems to be causing some problems in actually who owned the open space there, and whether it would get adopted or whether or not the residents will have to pay money for it to be managed, i.e. grass cutting, hedge trimming and the like. It does seem that if that is the case, that will continue. I think it is a real problem in how well that these places can be looked after. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions for Councillor Byram? I'm not seeing any indication in the chat room. If members are experiencing problems with the chat room, can they please use the hand sign so I can see? Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Byram. If you can turn your microphone off now, there doesn't appear to be any questions for you. So I'm now going to ask Richard Barton, the agent for the applicant, to address the board. Mr. Barton, can you turn on your camera and microphone, and you have 3 minutes to speak, after which you may be asked questions of clarification from members of the board.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'm the planning consultant acting on behalf of the applicant. This proposal on a site which is part of a strategic housing allocation in the local plan will bring many significant benefits to the local area and beyond. Not least, it will provide a significant part of the funding necessary to deliver the substantial Northwest Crew infrastructure package of highways improvements. Members have already signed this off, but within this scheme, the package of highways improvements, it cannot go ahead unless this scheme progresses as well. The applicant recognises the challenges presented on the highway network within the area, which is why this application facilitates infrastructure provision before development. Highways officers support the scheme. The proposal will provide up to 400 new homes. The council is providing an enhanced affordable housing package of 20%, which on this scheme is over and above that which would be considered viable when delivered by the private sector, as the council is forgoing some land value and profit on the scheme. In addition to this, obligations will be provided for education, health and indoor recreation. The obligations amount to just over 3.9 million. plus the affordable offer. At this stage, the main purpose of the outline application is to demonstrate the technical suitability of the site, to demonstrate it is deliverable. The proposal is informed by a wealth of technical work, including an environmental impact assessment. This is an incredibly thorough document which incorporates a large number of technical studies. The work has been assessed by multiple external consultees such as Natural England and the Environment Agency, as well as officers within the Council. In this respect, as set out in the officer's report before you, the application has been found to be technically sound. The proposal has been designed to function fully alongside the other parts of the allocation as part of a wider master plan, particularly the blower vestry scheme, which follows this item on your agenda. It has been informed by extensive discussions with key stakeholders, including the hospital, councillors, highways engineers, blower and vestry, and most importantly, the local community. These discussions have taken place over a period of several years, firstly leading to the allocation of LPS 4 in the local plan, then the application for strategic highways improvements, then informing the outline proposals before you. Granting permission today will be a significant and positive step towards facilitating commencement of the important Northwest Crew infrastructure package of works. I must reiterate that without the approval of this and the subsequent application, the Northwest Crew infrastructure cannot. It relies on the funding. In these challenging times, this proposal should be viewed as very good news, and I respectfully ask, therefore, that members support the recommendation of their officers and grant outline planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chairman, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, are there any questions for Mr. Barton, please, from members of the board? Councillor Hogben?
Thank you, Chairman. I need to understand this right. It's a kind of chicken and egg situation here, apparently. It's being said that the Northwest Crew Highways package, the extensive package which has been approved in principle, can't go ahead unless we approve these, make these outline approvals. But on the other hand, if we make the outline approvals, really speaking, the highways have to be built before those houses are actually occupied. So do I understand it right then that there'll be no occupation of houses or of the scheme if approved and if it goes to reserved matters until such time as the package is. So if you like, to just want to clarify this particular circle of events, which comes first, the roads or the houses? I would have said the roads need to come first before we can actually have houses occupied and everything, all the concomitant issues which are referred to in the report, namely whether it's traffic, education or anything else. Could you just clarify that for me? And I do have another question, but I'll wait the answer of that one first.
Yes, certainly, Councillor. I mean, it's a very fair and good question to ask. It is such an important issue. I don't think I've been involved with any other scheme in the Northwest that's lasted for such a long time while we've been trying to make sure the highways improvements will work and that they can be properly implemented at the right time relative to the housing. So you're absolutely right. From our perspective, yes, we understand that the road network already has its challenges currently. We understand the need for these improvements. And you're right, there will be a phased delivery here whereby significant parts of the road network will need to be introduced before the houses can be occupied. So you're absolutely right. I say significant phases because there are large swathes of these highways infrastructure improvements which go quite some way beyond this site, but certainly the ones in the immediate locality which are of critical importance in terms of junction capacity and everything else. Yes, the work's being carried out up front in this instance, which is a good thing.
Okay, so to follow up on that, Chair, then, because there was a comment made by the ward council, and it was, to be honest, I found it very difficult to hear Councillor Evans But he was, I think, suggesting that it was not obvious from these applications how they link together. Are you able, shall we say, to publicly confirm that if the highways package goes ahead or is funded, that actually the north and the south of this whole site will be properly linked, and there's an extensive package which I can't possibly describe because it's too complicated for me.
Yeah, yes, very much so. I mean, to give you a bit of comfort, my involvement with engaging with Blower and Vistry, as it is now, dates back to 2015, acting for Engine of the North as they were then. Extensive discussions from the beginning based on a combined master plan that brought both of the sites together. I know that there are requirements to make sure important things such as green linkages as well, you know, be it footpaths, be it cycleways, they need to go up to the boundary of one site and start from the boundary of the next, and they need to join together properly. So obviously at this stage, what I would say is that we've got a master plan that's submitted with the application. It's the same for both of the sites, for this one and for the next application. Both applications sit comfortably within that master plan. So yeah, I mean, it's been at the forefront of our minds. This thing needs to work as a joined up effort. So that's what we're trying to achieve. And I'm satisfied that the planning approvals today would facilitate that.
And just one other question, if you don't mind, Chair, and Mr. Barton. You did touch upon viability. And I see from the report it states that that viability appraisal is accepted, but you yourself have said that the amount of affordable housing that's possible under that viability appraisal is 20%. I'm bound to ask, because every member of this committee, in a sense, has got a vested interest. Well, all members of the community have a vested interest. This is council-owned land. Can it be explained why we can't achieve 30% on what is effectively a public investment of land?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that as well, Chair. That's not a problem. I mean, from our perspective, what I must be clear on, the viability tests, which have been comprehensive on this application, obviously they've been sent out for independent verification. The results that actually came back for the Engine of the North scheme were quite clear that the scheme could stomach 10% affordable housing. Obviously, you know, we've talked about some of the very significant obligations that the scheme is expected to deliver, and there's 2.2 million, I think, of highways contributions, which is a big old sum for schemes to support. So the viability actually came back at 10% affordable, and obviously there's a discussion, as you rightly say. You know, this is a council-driven scheme. What do we do? Do we proceed with 10% with a certain return, or do we increase the affordable and reduce the return in terms of the land value, the profits on the site? The council obviously taken a decision after a lot of deliberating and discussions with people that ultimately they feel the affordable should be increased from 10 to 20%. By doing that, I think it brings the profitability of the site down to 5%, when I think under normal circumstances you'd expect to achieve 15 to 20%. The only thing I can say about bumping it up to 30 is that I think you'd end up with something very significantly less than 5%, to the point where I think the site becomes unviable, and then you start to question the delivery of the whole thing. So, you know, they've taken a leap from 10 to 20, which I think ultimately is deemed to be the right decision. But as a result of that, there isn't any scope to go further than that, as I understand. But it's a good thing that it's gone from 10 to 20.
Thank you for the answer, Mr. Barton. Thank you, Chair.
No, Chair, I think you're still muted.
Thank you. Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Chair. My very complicated development. You've got the housing element, and then you've got the building, and there's an issue with one part of the site which we're going to use for greens. How long is this development going to take to deliver?
It's a very good question. At the moment, obviously, this is an outline approval. I mean, I'm pleased to confirm that it won't surprise you to learn that there's significant interest from house builders in taking this site forward and building it out. Much depends on build out rates. I mean, I guess if I was giving you my best estimate at the moment, you'd be hoping that getting a reserved matters application following in 2021 at some stage, all being well. And then you'd obviously, once you've got that and once the infrastructure is in place, the housing would follow. So there will be a period, I'm sure, of at least 2 or 3 years, I would imagine, between houses actually being occupied and where we are now, just naturally allowing for the planning system to follow its course. That does depend on build out rates and depends on whether we're looking at one house builder or two. So I hope you don't hold me to that, but certainly we're still a couple of years away from my seeing some houses here.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Jeffrey, is that all, Councillor Redstone?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chair.
So, when Councillor Redstone has managed to turn his screen off, Councillor Jeffrey, if you'd like to ask your question.
Sorry, my computer is sticky today. I'm sorry.
Okay, Councillor Jeffrey, the floor's yours.
Thanks, Chair. So this application is for means of access only. I seem to recall reading that there'll be a loss of 7 trees. Can you explain a little bit about that? If it's access only, are those 7 trees purely associated with the access, or is it to do with the indicative scheme, internal scheme that's coming forward for reserved matters? And if so, is it necessary for those trees to have been lost?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, that's a very good question as well. From my perspective, I know that there are hedgerows that are being lost as a result of some of the infrastructure going in. It's inevitable just because of the need to create the accesses. In terms of trees, we're going to prepare a further arboricultural impact assessment report when the reserve matters application is done. There has been quite a lot of dialogue. We believe that in order to achieve a good scheme, there is a strong likelihood those 7 trees will probably need to go. But having said that, we're open to having further dialogue to see if there's any prospect of saving an additional number of them, because it's in everyone's interest to keep these features if we can do. So there'll be a condition added which requires some further work in that respect.
Thank you.
Okay. There's nothing. Is that all, Councillor Jeffrey, or do you have a further question? Oh, obviously not.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, fine. So if we now go to, there are no further comments in the chat room, and I've got no hand shown. So thank you very much, Mr. Barton. Oh dear. Sorry, momentarily I'd lost the script. Right. Members, right. Does the officer wish to respond to any of the issue raised by the public speakers?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure there's anything particular I wanted to pick up on. Let me just try and, I think in terms of Councillor Evans's comments that he made, which I think probably the main focus of my attention here, he sort of raised 2 issues that I've kind of made a note of that I think required a response. The first one was to do with sort of road network issues. Now, clearly, the whole purpose of the North West Crew package is to address existing on-road issues within the area. We know there are congestion hotspots within a particular network, and also that the road scheme clearly is intended to provide the access to the new development. So it's a dual, the road serves both functions. And the whole point of the road scheme is to make sure that it does provide adequate traffic movements in this area. And the highways, my highways colleagues are all convinced this is a perfectly workable and perfectly good scheme. So we have no concerns that there will be any issues going forward into the future. And clearly, it is a highways-led scheme. That's the purpose of the way it's been done. The second point was with regards to the public open space and the way in which that's managed. Always an issue on these development sites. The council clearly is not looking to take on more management of these sites, and that certainly seems to be its policy stance, that we don't adopt these pieces of public open space as a general rule. It has happened clearly, but that's not generally the policy. So the intention would be that they would be privately managed by a management company. And what we want to make sure is that the provisions of that are set out in the 106, in other words, what their requirements are. So that's in terms of what the provision is. So whether it's the various different types of play areas, the leaps, the laps, the NEEPs, use all the acronyms for the different areas of play, obviously the pieces of open space in terms of just sort of general open space areas, if there are any football pitches, sort of more formal provision. So we need to make sure the 106 covers all of those aspects, and more importantly, possibly, is to make sure that they are managed in perpetuity. There is no point in laying all these areas out if they're not properly managed, but that's something that we would want to cover through the Section 106 agreement. And clearly at this stage, it's an outline application. We've got lots of indicative layouts of where these play areas would be, but we'd fix those at the reserve matter stage. So at this stage, we're not fixing where these are and how big they are, the exact sizes. You can see there's a lot of detailed comments for an answer in the report in terms of what they would want to see in terms of provision. And the developers clearly are aware of that, so they will know what to look for when it comes to submit a reserve matters application. So we're quite comfortable those issues can be addressed. At this stage, Chair, I don't think I have anything else to add. I'm clearly happy to take any further questions.
Okay, right. Are there any questions to Mr. Crowd? Oh, Mr. Hurders, do you wish to add anything, given that there were comments made about the highway network?
Thank you, Chair. No, just to re-emphasise what Adrian said there, really was comprehensive traffic modelling has been undertaken for both of the sites, this site and the one we're going to consider later in the meeting. That extensive modelling has been audited by myself, and we are satisfied that the Crewe Highways package does mitigate the effects of both developments. The crucial thing for us, in addition, is the timing of when those road improvements need to be in. And I think it's been discussed already during the meeting. We've said prior to first occupation of any of the dwelling on this site or the next site, the road infrastructure that serves these sites need to be in place. So that was all we need to add at this time, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurders. I have two members wishing to ask questions, Councillors Williams and then Hogben, in that order. So, Councillor Williams, would you like to ask a question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's a question specifically about policy LPS4, which is something which is cited by the response from Crewe Town Council, which I was interested to read, also very interested to read with the officers' appraisal. And I think as a whole, I think it's very detailed and comprehensive package that we've got to look at, but bearing in mind it's a very complicated development. I just want to sort of pursue the point about the joined upness of this. The Town Council is saying that a master plan is required for the whole of Leighton West, and they cite a design code. They've got interesting comments there about green infrastructure, etc. I'd just like to have a little bit of a reassurance, really, that this is being looked at in a very holistic and connected way. I wondered what officers had to say on that particular aspect. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Crowther, do you want to answer that question?
Indeed. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Yeah, I mean, the slide I showed you earlier was with the council's master plan. What I will show you on the second, maybe my mistake, what I will show you on the second presentation is the general master plan for the entire site. And if you like, the second master plan that I'll show you is the one that covers the majority of the site in effect. So we've seen one small segment of these two local plan strategy areas, but the other one shows, if you like, the lion's share. And when I come and show you that, you'll see that how this links in with the rest of the site and covers some 3/4, probably, if not more, of the overall coverage of the local plan strategy. That's LPS 3 and 4. So it shows how all of these sites interlink, and it shows how all of these areas would be actually would be sort of linked together and developed. In other words, what all the uses would be and how the linkages across all these areas would be as well. Now, I did mention during my presentation, there is an area down the southwest of the site which is not included in this master plan. But I also referenced that there are a series of constraints across that site, so that's why it is not included at this stage. And a large part of it is also covered by the Bentley master plan. So those members that will have been on the board when we considered the Bentley proposals, probably a year or so ago now, will have seen those proposals for an expansion of Bentley northwards in effect. So we are quite comfortable as planners that the whole site has been considered, that all the linkages are there, and there are a series of conditions you'll see that make sure that we have connections through, so we don't have ransom strips between the sites, which is always a concern, to make sure that we do have footpath networks and cycleway networks that actually link through all of these areas. And that's a critical importance here. We've got to make sure that Crewe functions as a holistic body And we're quite comfortable that all of those aspects are covered by the main master plan. I said apologies, members. I should have probably showed you that one at the same time with the other application, but you'll see that shortly with the second application. And if you remember from your members pack, you'll see that in there. It's the what it calls itself. It's got the one with the blow home symbol on the bottom of it. It's called the illustrative master plan. So you can see that for yourselves. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Crowther. Councillor Hogben.
Thank you, Chairman. Just be patient with me because there's been more than one question.
That's fine.
And I'll have to refer to my paper pack so that you might hear some rustling too. Yeah. So I was going to ask about some of these mnemonics. There seem to be a lot of abbreviations in this report, not all of which necessarily are absolutely clear to all members of the board or come to that members of the public. And I think I really do think actually we should make sure that we're clear what we're writing about. For example, page 14, it mentioned at the bottom of page 14, it mentions LLFA and UU. Now, UU, I guess, is United Utilities. LLFA must be, I suppose, the local flood authority, but perhaps that can be clarified. That's just a little one on the bottom of page 14. Page 17, in the middle there, education mentioned that to alleviate forecast pressures on primary, secondary and special educational need provision, financial contribution of, and then it mentions £1,756,573 is requested. That is that simply a request, or is that actually based upon the kind of calculations of what is essential? So there is a slight difference between what people are asking for and what is actually needed. Perhaps that could be answered. Bear with me, please. I think Mr. Yes, I think my next question's been answered actually, or Mr. Crowther has answered, because I've written here on page 21, it is considered the proposals comply with the local plan indication when read as part of the master plan. And I just wrote on my papers, show me. And I gather we're going to be shown that later, although it would be nice to see it sooner. It is important to have that master plan. Could somebody, page 22, halfway down, talks about network capacity. And there's a paragraph that starts to assess the traffic impact. Could somebody explain the technical stuff that's there, about particularly where it talks about traffic demand was distributed across the network. Models were found to successfully meet the convergence and validation criteria and are therefore considered to be acceptable for traffic model. What on earth does that mean? I have no idea. I'm not a professional traffic planner, and I don't understand that, and I don't suppose anybody else in the room does either. It'd be helpful for that to be explained, because there is a lot of concern, obviously, about traffic volumes now and in the future. Page 24. I know this is painful, but it's as well for me to ask them all now. Page 24. There's a mnemonic there. I don't understand it. AOD. What does that mean? That's a simple one to answer. Soon be finished, I hope. I think maybe my other comments are things that are, yeah, basically about mnemonics. You know, again, just so that we all understand. It mentions LAPs, LEAPs, NEAPs and CAD plans. That's on the bottom of page 30 and page 31. I know that LEAP has something to do with play areas and it's under that general heading, but it would be nice to know exactly what they are and for them to be explained. Because quite honestly, you know, there was some of the report I found was written more for the I think it should be borne in mind these reports are supposed to be for who the audience is. The audience, first of all, is the strategic planning board or the members, but more important than that, it's the public. So if it's over technical, it makes me, I do start to wonder, why is this technical? Is it intended to baffle me? And I'm not suggesting that for a minute, but I mean, it would be helpful. Please bear in mind the audience. So I know there's a few comments there, but there are several questions too, Chair. Thank you for your patience, and I now switch my microphone and video off.
I share, Councillor Hogman, that's fine. I share your concern, and perhaps in future, if there is going to be an excessive use of mnemonics, particularly ones that we're going to be using on a regular basis, like leaps, neeps and laps, that they could be explained at the front of the agenda. So, Mr. Crowther, would you like to address the questions asked by Councillor Hogman, please?
Certainly, Chair. Apologies, Councillor Hogman. We don't sort of try and make this difficult. We obviously work in a world where we use the acronyms, and sometimes we do get carried away with ourselves. So I can only apologise for that. We'll try and make sure that most of the acronyms are covered in the report, but clearly there are some that are not. So I apologise for those being in there. In terms of sort of working your way through the issues you raise, the first one I have on my notes here is the education contribution. Now, if you look at the education section within the report, you'll see it sets out a bit more detail about what they're actually looking for, but essentially I feel that the full requirement of that figure, the 1.75 million, is required to meet the educational needs of that particular area, and I would take it that was essential. That is what they're requesting, but it is essential in their view for provision. They don't use that terminology, but that's the phrase I would apply to that in particular. And I think the vast majority of that in this particular case is being met in any case. The second point I have regard to traffic impact, which I will defer to my colleague, Mr. Hurdis, because I think he can better explain that than I can. But in terms of the rest of the acronyms that you refer to, I'll try and work my way through those. Just for clarity, yes, UU is United Utilities, and the LLFA is the Lead Local Flood Authority. So that's us effectively. That's a section within the Highways Department that deals specifically with flooding and drainage issues. Okay, so moving on to the other ones I've got here, page 24. There was one, the A and D. This AOD, basically that's a flood level. So in other words, it's sort of the base level for flooding. So normally, I forget what the actual terminology actually stands for, but it basically sets a level within the flooding assessments for these things. So it's looking at, if you read the context of the acronym, the highest part of the application site is located towards the northern boundary and is 55 metres AOD. Basically means above a mean level set at the bottom of the watercourse. There we go. It is the above ordnance datum is what it actually stands for. There's the exact answer. Thank you very much. But it basically sets a minimum level effectively from which everything else is measured from. It is essentially what that's there for. And then we come on obviously to our friends, the leaps and the laps and the leaps. These basically are all different play areas within public open space. These were referenced, I think, at page 30 of the report. So taking them each of their areas. So a lap is a local area of play. A leap is a locally equipped area of play. In other words, it has play equipment within it rather than just literally being an area of grass or whatever. And a NEEP is a neighbourhood equipped area of play. So it's a stage higher. So the local area of play is a small area within a group of houses, and then obviously a NEEP then is a larger area within a neighbourhood area. So these are sort of a series of stages, if you like, in terms of the provision of play within a particular area. I don't think there's any others referenced in this one. I think there is a higher level beyond that, as but those are the three that are referenced in this particular report. I think Councillor Hogben had picked up all your acronyms there, but I would defer to Mr. Hurdis in regard to the highways comments you referred to at page 22. Thank you.
There was also CAD on page 31.
Apologies, missed that one.
Computer-aided design, Steve. CAD.
Yeah, computer-aided design. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hurdis.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Ogden, there for the question. It is quite technical. There's no secrets of that, and that's why sort of traffic modelling is a separate profession in itself in terms of highway transportation. If I can just briefly explain, traffic models are used to predict what's going to happen to a highway network when new development takes place or is built out. So the way we do that is we have to establish what's there at the moment. So therefore we can undertake traffic surveys of the current traffic flow network. Then we build on what's already got permitted in terms of live planning permissions and what that would generate. And then we also add on, or the developer in this case, because they've paid for the models to be run, what would be generated by the new development. So those trips are calculated and assessed, and then what's called distributed onto the model. So the distribution is a prediction in terms of where the traffic will go. So what traffic will go north, what traffic will go west, east and south, and the percentage turning movements or the percentage distribution those trips are likely to take. So that's the sort of first point of it, really. The model is run, and then results are generated by the model, and then those results are then sense checked against standard parameters that are widely used with these types of model. We reference a VISIM model. A VISIM is actually from a German word, Verkehrsnetz, which is network. So it's a network model, and then a Saturn model means a bigger type of model. So there are some acronyms that we generally use in traffic modelling. So the results are looked at, and in essence, to sense check and look for outliers to make sure it's an accurate reflection of what would happen. There are certain convergence rules within the modelling, so therefore it's looked at to make sure that a certain percentage are within a standard what you'd expect to happen within the model. So they are called convergence rules, and they are quite detailed. They are available within the VISIM software modelling. So that's the sort of convergence. And then I think you asked about the validation as well. So they're often termed together, validation and convergence, to make sure that the convergence, i.e., as I've just said, what has happened is what you'd expect to happen in terms of what the prediction is. But the validation is often, is the report valid in terms of the predicted queue length, for example. And often the validation will take the case of actual surveys will be done on the network to make sure that the predicted queue lengths aren't too far out from what's actually happening on the network at the moment, bearing in mind the new development that's going to take place. So often those two things, convergence and validation, are covered in a separate report to make sure the model is fit for use. And there's certain parameters that must be met to enable it to be fit for use. That report's produced, it's sent through with the model, and that's the basis for the prediction of the model that we use to test to make sure that the development can be accommodated on the highway network or within the new highway network with the interventions that are going to be put into place. So hopefully that's a little bit of an overview there, Councillor Hogben, has helped you.
That is helpful, and I might suggest that at some point in the future it would be useful. I mean, planning members were all supposed to be trained from time to time, and I think highway modelling would be of significant interest to planning members, well, in fact, members in general, and then we can understand better what is actually how it's done and what it actually means. Yes, I think I understand about the validation. Still not quite clear about the convergence, but we'll leave that because that sounds highly technical. But I would suggest if it's that technical, that that could be more confusing than helpful. But yeah, future if like training for members and officers probably will be helpful. And being as this is a strategic planning board, sometimes just look outside of the immediate application, because that will have a bearing far and wide across the borough in the future, especially with the green agenda. Better stop now.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
Chairman, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm trying to save the bandwidth. I'm sure that it was up by our officers, Councillor Hogben, that it does sound a remarkably sensible idea that when we have our next planning session, that perhaps that might be a topic that Mr. Herders can wax lyrical for us about. So I now have 2 further people wishing to speak, and I'm going to call them the order that they register. That's Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor Redstone. Councillor Jeffrey first.
Thanks, Chair. One of the questions is for you, Chair, really. Would it be permissible for Mr. Crowther to show us his slide from the next presentation of the master plan, the overall master plan? I'm just conscious that with it being the master plan requirement being a requirement of the local plan strategy, we should really give it due consideration within this application for completeness.
I'm sure that can be arranged, Councillor Jeffrey. I will ask Mr. Crowther to work the technology so that can happen when he comes back to answer your question, if possible. Okay, if not before we vote on this item. So exactly. If you go ahead with your second question.
Thank you. Yeah. So my second question is really it's related to the master plan in that for the next application, can we put a condition in to oblige the applicant to include the different business, because looking at the local plan strategy, the site as a LPS4 as a whole needs to provide facilities such as a pub and a children's day nursery, that sort of thing. I'm conscious in the next one we've got those business classes included, but are they obliged to provide that? And could they not include it and say, oh, it's another package, and we're just passing the buck around? So I want to know whether, as a whole, the site, the LPS4 will provide all these facilities, and that whether they'll be obliged to provide it in one or other, because I've not seen a master plan saying this will provide a pub in this package. Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, Mr. Crowther.
Right, you're testing my technology use now. This is taking things out of sequence, so let's see if I can.
If I've got to ride 2 computers, I'm not going to let anybody else get away with not doing that.
Right. Okay. So this is obviously the second slide shot. So you're stealing my thunder here. Let's moving quickly through. There we go. So this is in your packs, members. So you will have seen this slide. So there should be nothing new in that regard. So if you remember back in my original presentation, this was the site that we looked at for the Engine of the North, or economic development as they are now. So this is the site here. So this is the smaller parcel, and this is the larger parcel. And you can see here that Randall Thorpe, who are the sort of master planners, if you like, who did both schemes, have shown how that sits within the general master plan for the entire development. Now, please remember there are 2 local plan strategy sites here. One is obviously in this area to the south, and the other one is the area to the north. So in other words, it covers both of them, this particular master plan. Again, I reference that it doesn't cover this small area down here, which is part of the Bentley master plan, but basically it covers the whole area. So you can see here how all the linkages work and how all of these sites interact with each other. Now, bearing in mind, again, we're looking at an outline here, so we're establishing the basic principles of the parcels and the interlinkages between them. Now, obviously, I don't want to go into too much detail at this stage, but I can show you in the presentation on this application how the various networks knit together in terms of how the footpath links in particular, and the cycle links, which obviously are critical importance here, interact with the highway network, which is kind of, if you like, is the kind of the first part of the jigsaw. So you can see here, this is the overall indicative master plan for the whole site, and you can see how the various elements sit within that. Now, Councillor Jeffrey's question which is a very fair question, which is about how we actually ensure that the various facilities that are shown within this master plan, so the local centre, which is in this area here, and then there's a proposal for a sort of a pub site on the junction with the roundabout. So you can't see that on here, but this is the Bradfield Road roundabout in this location. So these are the sort of two sort of like central features of this development. Now, what we would normally do is an indicative master plan of this nature. We would approve this as part of the development. I think that the normal phraseology for this sort of thing is to be broadly in accordance with the indicative master plan. So if we then subsequently get a reserved master's application that does not include this, so it doesn't include these other critical elements, then it would not be in general accordance with the indicative master plan, and that's something that obviously that would influence that decision-making process at that stage. We wouldn't normally put a condition on that requires the district centre as part of a proposal, something we could look at. Obviously something to debate as part of this second application, because clearly it's not provision within this application. But you'll note there's some reference in there to sort of setting minimum sizes within the district, the local centre, if you like. You know, there's floor areas and those sort of categories. So that those are things we want to control in terms of the range of uses and thing. But at this stage, that the reality is the developers probably are not 100% sure what that actual provision would be, so it would be difficult to fix that in any way, in any sort of way, other than to set sort of certain parameters we want to operate in. So hopefully that answers Councillor Jeffrey's questions. And now I've got the challenge of coming out of all of these various slides, so just bear with me. I think that's Councillor Jeffrey, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I just wanted to confirm that the application we're considering meets its obligations under the overall LPS 4 master plan. So that's fine. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Chair.
You're muted again, Chair.
Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Chair. My question is Mr. Crowther, and it's regarding the intended contribution this site is going to make to these various items of infrastructure that are going to be required to make the site viable. We've seen it time and time again where a outline planning permission is given for a number of houses, in this case 400. All the costs are worked out on the basis of that, and then this comes again to us, and the developer actually only wants to build 300 houses. All the figures are reworked and the community ends up the loser. What can you do to assure us that this actually is a viable site for 400 houses? And what can we do as a board to stop this happening in the future?
Okay, I'll try and answer your question. In terms of, obviously, any landowner, whether it be us or a private sector, wants to maximise the development potential of an area for all the right reasons, because obviously it brings a whole host of benefits with that in terms of provision of housing and so on. And what they've demonstrated as part of this application, that this site can, realistically, through the sort of various proving layouts have shown, provide up to 400 houses on the site. Now, the reality is, until you get a house builder on board and they actually lay out the site with their house types and the mix of houses that they think is appropriate, and obviously it's been through due process, the exact number will not be decided until at that stage. Although I think most members have been on the board long enough to realise that, generally speaking, what is granted at outline is fairly mirrored when it comes to the reserve matters. Certainly the cases I've been involved in this borough, I've not seen any that have come in under those numbers, and certainly it would not be appropriate, or it wouldn't be within their permission to increase the numbers. So if you apply for up to 400, in my experience, most applications come in, like let's say in a 380 to 400 band, unless there's a particularly unusual circumstances within that site that wasn't known at the outline stage, something that's come out of the further survey works or whatever. So that, if you like, it sort of sets the context for it. Now, in terms of contributions, highways have felt it appropriate to put a roof tax, and that's what the £5,500, which is the significant contribution in this case. There are two other ones within the highways contribution list, but the one that's significant, they feel that is appropriate in terms of impact, in terms of what would be appropriate to mitigate the harm caused by a vehicle on the network, and sort of and make sure that is mitigated through the provision of extra highway facilities. So that is the way it's been formulated. And I think the highways are quite comfortable. That's a way of achieving that. Now, should the developer only build 300 houses on this site, then clearly there will be shortfall in that amount of money. I accept that, but I think that is highly unlikely in this particular situation. Whether we can guarantee, the way it's set up at the moment, clearly we can't guarantee that at this stage, because it depends on what comes through as the Reserve Matters application. But I think it's very unlikely to happen. I don't think I can add an awful lot at this stage to that, I'm afraid.
Okay, and would the roof tax, as you put it, go up if the numbers go down?
There is no provision for that in the 106 wording as it's written at this moment, no.
Perhaps we should leave that out of this application then until we know what the numbers of houses are actually going to come forward.
The issue there is we have to set the parameters of the 106 at the outline stage. So we have to build in what the general characteristics, and obviously that needs to be part of the decision-making process at this stage. Now, if you feel it's appropriate to have some sort of review mechanism within that, that's within your GIF members to look at that. So in other words, it was something that would be reviewed at a stage in the future. But at this stage, the recommendation is what stated in the report, but obviously, you know, that's within your gift to change that.
Thank you very much for your very full answer. Sorry, I'm having a problem turning this off.
Sorry, Chairman, you're on mute.
I think I'm going to keep my microphone open. It might be easier for the running of the election. Right, so I understand that the ward councillor obviously has already addressed this today. As not a member of the board, it is normal practice to go to the member who is but having found out who that is, that person doesn't wish to open the debate. So I have had an indication that Councillor Hogben, who is also a nearby ward member, would like to start the debate. So I'm going to allow Councillor Hogben to start the debate, and anybody else who wishes to partake in the debate, can they please indicate in the chat room, and I will call you in the order in which I see your names appear. Councillor Hogben.
Hello. I wasn't planning to open this debate, but there we go. So I shall do this on the hoof. That sounds good. So, well, there's been a fairly full debate on all this. I think the points have been made though that this is all part of a greater plan. I mean, I have said on previous occasions more than once in relation to this part of Crewe, Northwest Crewe, that actually we do need to take the holistic view, which I'm really pleased to hear Councillor Williams use that word earlier on, that we should be able to see the whole picture, because I've used the jigsaw now, in the past, and we're going back 3 or 4 years when we were talking about some earlier applications. I can remember being told, well, we're only dealing with the application that's in front of us. Don't get, and when I was asking questions about, for example, well, how does this link in with Bentley plans or other plans? And the simple point being that you've got a jigsaw. This is very much a jigsaw. It's quite obvious from the master plan slide that we were shown just a few minutes ago, which I see that is actually in the paperwork relating to the next application. But if you don't have the whole picture, what happens is you deal with each application in isolation, and you put the pieces on the board, and then lo and behold, when you've done all the jigsaw, oh dear, there's a hole in the middle, there's a piece missing. You know, I've had that experience, for argument's sake, with the Sudoku. I think I'm doing so well, and I get to the very end of the puzzle and it fails because I've missed something. And so we do need to take that holistic view, and that's bound to shape some of the decisions we make. I mean, particularly in relation to possible Section 106 agreements and the like. But then coming back to this particular application, I see that, to be frank with you, my feeling about the general report was that there was an awful lot of things still to go, and it's all very well saying, well, it's only an outline planning application and all you're actually approving is the access, and everything else will be dealt with at reserved matters stage. And what I'm always anxious about is then we get to reserved matters stage and only to be told you can't discuss XYZ because we discussed it at the outline stage. So there's a bit of a catch there. Now, as far as I can see, the access matters effectively are dealt with in a general way, very general way, by the Northwest Crew Highways package, which has already been approved, hasn't it? It says so in the report. So that all those various roundabouts and the general road layout. So in a sense, that bit of it is already spoken for, you know, approving the access, unless we want to redesign the whole of the Northwest package. So the other aspect of it is a possible future Section 106 agreement, which I assume would be with the actual developer of the site. In this case, presumably when Cheshire East Council has actually sold the land with the benefit of planning permission. Now, if I've got that wrong, somebody can correct me straight away. So, right, so we're doing the classic thing. We've got a piece of land, apply for planning permission, do an outline sort of application, and then sell it with the benefit of planning permission for XYZ. And then we talk about what the is. And that's a very interesting question from all sorts of points of view, particularly for Cheshire East Council owned land. One could argue, couldn't one, that it's a council owned piece of land, and can you tell me, could someone explain why we would even seek to make a profit? I know I'm not against profit, but why would, in this case, we're talking about effectively an investment in a major scheme for the north of Crewe, and that has an impact upon affordable housing, doesn't it? I see somewhere in the report it says normal viability criteria suggest, you know, you can only have 10% affordable housing, and effectively a compromise has been suggested of 20%, but if you had 30%, the viability, the profitability would be 4-point-something%. Now, speaking of someone who would like to be able to invest a small amount of money, all that's available to me actually is 0.01%. So 4.7% is pretty generous. Anyway, that's another question, but it does bear upon the conditions that we might consider later on. But there were aspects to the application which I felt were not quite ready. I think they're dealt with within the report. I mean, notably, page 27, for example, talks about, in accordance with the mitigation hierarchy of all of the existing hedgerows should be retained. And I think this is a suggestion from the ecologist. Keep all the hedgerows, and I won't read all the rest of that. In fact, it says the submitted biodiversity metric, another technicality, calculates the scheme has the capacity to deliver a net gain in the value of hedgerows on the site. it said that could be dealt with by means of a condition. I trust it is being addressed by condition within the 30 odd or so that we're being asked to approve. I'll just make a couple of other comments and then let other people, because this could go, you know, there's some big issues within the section 111 agreement that's referred to and the future section 106. Affordable housing, 20%, split 65 affordable rent, 35 intermediate. Question is, can we not go to 30%? You know, this is a council-owned site. We do have a policy of 30%. Why can't we do that, really speaking? In the end, is it disastrous for the council's finances, for a start? And, you know, we do want to have homes that are affordable which are genuinely affordable, which means actually, you know, decent, reasonable rents. Education, 1,488,500. But I asked the question earlier on, education requested 1.75 million. And as Mr. Crowther said, that would be considered to be essential. So I asked myself the question, what's happened? So where's the who covers the missing £262,000 of essential needs? Who does that when we come to providing education? Because the local schools, Leighton Academy and is probably the nearest primary, and well, it's pretty well on the site, and Mablins Lane a little way away. I would say capacity probably not capable. I don't think Leighton Academy is capable of further expansions. No space for it for a start. So it's generally accepted within the master plan. There needs to be a new primary school in this area. But in the meantime, we're not asking the developer. We wouldn't even be asking ourselves or other developers to to make the necessary contribution. And that's so who feeds the gap? Because the children have to go to school somewhere. We have a duty somewhere or another to provide those facilities, and so it goes on. And also the arboricultural impact assessment. The tree assessment, quite important. There aren't many trees on the site. It would be nice to keep some of the veteran oaks and the like. Would it not? You know, there aren't that many of them, and I just feel that to some extent there's a slightly cavalier attitude to some of the trees. A lot of them probably, a lot of trees, such as they might not be great, but we've got hedgerows that should be protected. We've got trees. Some are, could be kept. And this is a council-owned site. We can set some kinds of. Surely we can set some kinds of standard for what we do with our land. So there we go. I'll leave it there. Oh, I'll just notice that Councillor Farrell has joined us, but obviously he'll be able to enjoy the next debate, won't he?
He'll be able to take Councillor. Welcome, Councillor Farrell. Councillor Hogman, Councillor Farrell will be able to enjoy the rest of this debate. He just won't be able to vote at the end of it. Can I just point out two things, Councillor Hogman, in your statement that you might not have picked up on from the applicant's agent. The first is there is an acknowledgement the tree issue needs to be resolved and that there is a requirement for a further arboricultural assessment to be submitted as part of the reserved matters. And secondly, with regard to the profit margins on the 30 versus 20%, my and will correct me if I'm wrong, is that Mr. Barton said that the proposition at 20% affordable housing would give a return between 4 and 5% as opposed to the 15% that would normally be expected. And that secondly, and if we were to go to 30%, the viability of the site per se would be in question, suggesting, I think, that we would either be at a position where there was no profitability, or even it might even start to cost in terms of the development. Just for clarification, I'm pointing this out. I'm not.
Okay, Chair. I accept that, and I think I was acknowledging that there's going to be a tree survey. What I'd mentioned that at the end. That's fine. But on the other point about viability, the report that we were given beforehand, page 36, it states, second paragraph, the provision of 30% affordable housing would result in a profit level of 4.7%.
In that case, Councillor Hogben, I think we have a situation whereby the written report and the verbal presentations of the agent are different. So we will seek Mr. Crowther's clarification on that point. And if we can do that, I'll go to the next speaker, but then we'll come back. I am going to call Councillor Edgar next to speak, please. And then Councillor, and then Councillor Redstone has indicated he wishes to speak, but he also has indicated that he lost connectivity, so I'm going to take advice with that. But if I can ask Councillor Edgar first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to the comments and questions and answers that have been put forward and the start of the debate, I can't see how we can do very much more with this application as it stands. It's building a new spine road, it's building this, it's building that, and it's providing money for education and for other services. Bearing all that in mind, I would like to propose for passing, please, for approval. Thank you.
Okay. Right, so situation is, before I go to Councillor Groves, Mr. Malcolm wishes to make a point of clarification, and I understand that the legal officer is dealing with the issue relating to Councillor Redstone's lack of connectivity. If I can go to Mr. Malcolm first and then Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. It was just the point about the 106. Well, it isn't the 106. We'll get, as Adrian introduced, we will now be doing that via a condition, but in effect, it will lead to a 106 eventually to secure the contributions. I think the point was just to emphasise the issue over that was made clear by the speaker, Richard Barton, about the viability. So, from a planning perspective, the viability, if this was any other developer, we would be saying that 10% is what we are supporting, because effectively the viability produces a profit of around about 15% at that level, with 10% affordable and all the other contributions that you've seen. But because this is the council, the council have decided independently from the local planning authority, and the two are distinct in this instance, to up that to 20%. So that will reduce the profit. My understanding is that it's about 5% per, if you like, 10% affordable in terms of profit. My understanding is that as you've seen within the report, if the provision of 30% affordable housing takes the profit level below 5%, and if you're below 5%, then that gets to the point where effectively it's really questionable whether actually it is viable to do, because of variables that can take place through costs as you build out the project. So in effect, although I haven't got the exact figure, I believe it's around about 9 or 10% in terms of as a profit, if you like. But I think it was just to make the point, particularly as the Councillor Hogben has raised it, was about the fact that this is an additional, if you like, from the council. Clearly, we're happy to accept that, because as a head of planning, we clearly want the priorities on affordable housing, and clearly members would support that, and the council would support it, which is why the council has offered that as landowner. So in effect, it means if and when the site does become sold, it will be sold at a lesser value, because effectively any future developer would be provided that additional amount of affordable housing. So it's just to clarify that point, Chair, in terms of the rest of the contributions in the future 106 are as they are. We know we've got an education service that wants a higher contribution, etc. Ultimately, it will the council will have to pick that up if it comes to it. And we've made clear that the contributions are what they are. Viability, unfortunately, does have a bearing on the ability to deliver all of the contributions and make it fully policy compliant. But I have to say on these sites the viability has been well and truly examined and interrogated, which is why you've got the details that you have within the report. But outside of that, there's a lot of technical work that's been done to examine these. So it was really just that point, Chair, to I think perhaps I suppose I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think actually this is a scheme that we should be supporting with that additional 20% affordable housing. And I think, as Councillor Hogben indicated, as a strategic site, it's a key strategic site for Crewe. And this one and the following up and the application to come, they've been a long time in the making. The road schemes started the ball on this last year, and we're now moving on with it. And actually, this is a really good scheme for Crewe to be sort of progressing with these. So, I fully endorse the recommendation. Yes, we're not quite getting the contributions that we would like, but unfortunately, that is just the way the viability can work, and you'll know that from past applications. So this scheme has my full support, and I do urge members to sort of consider the positives of the scheme, which I think members generally do in sort of supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malcolm, for that clarification. I hope that clears up the confusion, both for me and for Councillor Hogben and any other member that was confused. Might I suggest that in addition to the highways matters that we asked earlier on, that perhaps a note can be made that perhaps members of the SPB and all members who wish to attend can have some training about viability, so we perhaps better understand what we're being asked to do, particularly if it's going against council policy. So I do note that Councillor Groves wishes to speak, but before I go to Councillor Groves, I'm going to ask, and I've just seen that Councillor Critchley wishes to come in, but before I go to Councillors, I'd like Ms Baxter to come in to explain to us the situation regarding Councillor Redstone, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Redstone, for confirming that you had lost connection for part of the debate. I hadn't spotted that you weren't on the participant list, so thank you for confirming that you had lost connection. And previously we've had this issue before, and the advice has been you must hear all of the debate, and even if you've missed 30 seconds, you can't take part further in the debate or vote. So that's the advice, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. So in that case, Councillor Redstone, I cannot call you to the debate. So I'm now going to go to Councillor Groves, then Councillor Critchley, and then Councillor Jeffrey, in that order, please. Councillor Groves first.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I very much welcome this outline application, and I agree with David Malcolm. It is a key strategic site for Crewe, and I very much welcome it. I've listened to the debate, and I've listened to the points that Councillor Edgar has already made. And I'm happy to second Councillor Edgar's proposal for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's been proposed and seconded, but I have got speakers wishing to speak. Also, for information, I understand a second councillor also lost connection and will not be taking part in the vote. That's Councillor Morton. So, Councillor Critchley.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I welcome what you've just touched on with regards to training on viability, because it's one of my questions was obviously in relation to what Mr. Malcolm's just said, with 20% affordable housing, it knocks the profit to 4.7%, and it becomes unviable. My question really is, why do we need to make profit? That's, broadly, why do we need to make profit in general? And secondly, I mean, I am more than happy to look at the positives, and there are quite a few positives with this. But I don't think the argument that it's a good thing for Crewe is really the best line to take in terms of making a decision. But I'm willing to carry on listening and talk about the positives.
Okay, fine. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, couple of points. Firstly, on the trees, yeah, that's fine that it's going to be addressed at reserved matters. And I'd like to send a clear message, though, that the aspiration should be that we retain as many of those trees as possible. Looking at the site plan, it would look to me like we do need to lose one of the trees, but the 7 don't need to go. What I don't want is to get to the situation at reserve matters and it's all drawn up. Oh, it's done now, like we normally have the situation where it's too much to change when it comes to us, and it would be unreasonable to reject it on that point. On the viability situation, we seem to be kind of having a discussion about whether it should be 10, 20, 30%. Looking at the figures, 30% is 4.7%, 10% is 15.36 according to the viability review. Why can't we have 25%? I think I wouldn't want to cut it so close to the bone that, depending on what contingency they've got in the project, I've not picked that up in the viability assessment. I wouldn't want to cut it right to the bone such that we're at risk of making a loss, because that doesn't help anybody. But it doesn't have to be these 10% jumps. What could we have 25%, or is that half a house or something like that? I don't know. So I would like to see it personally. I would like to see it increase to 25%, which still leaves some money in the kitty. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, right. Before I go any further, I'm going to seek clarification. Given that we have a proposed and second to approve, do we have the right to go back and see whether or not we can seek an amendment to that proposition?
Do you want me to answer that, Chairman?
Yes, please, Sarah.
Well, we'd have to have somebody proposing an amendment to the proposition and seconding it, and then we'd take the amendment first, Chairman.
Okay, so that is feasible, because I was then going to ask Councillor Jeffrey if that was a proposition.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to propose that.
Right. Does that proposition that we increase the affordable housing to 25% have a seconder? Councillor.
Could we just seek clarification off David Malcolm whether there
I
is
was going to do that, but I wanted to make sure it was seconded before I went there. So, Councillor, if I can ask, Councillor Hogg, sorry,
I'll verbalise it, Chair. I second the proposition of 25%.
Thank you very much.
You can hear what the officers have to say.
So if we can now ask Mr. Malcolm or Mr. Crowther to respond to that before we go to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Rather than pick a figure out of the air now, which is effectively what we're doing, because we haven't got those percentages in front of us, what I was going to suggest, Chair, is that we, because there will be a point in here, and yeah, we, for example, we're not meeting the full education contribution, so therefore, in effect, the council will at some point probably have to cover that cost, as we have done on other schemes through the private sector. So never mind, this is, it's this council's money effectively that we're sort of dealing with here, and some of this isn't necessarily for us as a local planning authority, which is a slight anomaly, but it is something that we have to sit in our own little silo to an extent on these things. What I was going to suggest is that in addition to, or we build into the what effectively will be the condition for the future 106, is that we build in a review mechanism, which is effectively a clawback clause. So we've got a base point that establishes valuations around the 20% affordable housing. So therefore, what that clause does, which we have used before, is that where there is a significant uplift in value as a consequence of passage of time while the development is constructed, that in effect we would then basically reapportion some of that to go towards affordable housing. Now, depending upon the timing, that could be on site, but it's more likely to be an actual physical contribution to future affordable housing elsewhere. But that is something that is a relatively standard clause that we've used elsewhere. We've got the standard wording for that. So I think in terms of rather than playing around and picking a number on the affordable, I think that would be the safest way to go. So it means that we're safeguarding appropriate profit margins, but also safeguarding that we're not sort of losing something in the future. So I'm quite happy to do that in this instance, Chair. Sorry, Chair, if that's clearly agreeable, we've got a mover and seconder. It would have to be agreeable to them.
Okay.
To add that, Chair.
I'm going to go back to the proposer now, because he has indicated he wishes to seek clarification on another point. So, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Jeffrey.
He's on mute, Chairman.
Councillor Jeffrey, you're on mute.
Sorry, camera was off as well. Yeah, I just wanted to seek clarification on whether the estimated income from these sites has already been included in council forecasts. So if we were to increase the value to 25% or whatever mechanism David thinks is appropriate, whether we're robbing someone else and the council would have to find the money for something else from elsewhere. Thanks, Chair.
Do you know the answer to that question, Mr. Malcolm? I wouldn't have done as a planning officer.
No, I don't, and I guess this is where I probably draw the barrier down and say we are the local planning authority, and I don't want to get involved in, because ultimately, actually, that's not material. If we, and like I said, I think we go back to the notwithstanding what we've talked about, the base point from the planning point of view is that actually 10% would be acceptable in planning terms. Clearly, members are having a debate about whether it is in reality. So I think I will draw the line on that in terms of the implications, but all I would say is what I've indicated is that there have been requests for other payments, etc., within the viability, and we're not quite meeting some of those as well. So I think overall, you can work it out for yourself where some of those payments might have to come from in the future, and that any profit that comes from this site will clearly go back into council business and council services effectively. So, but I will stop short of commenting further on council finances. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jeffrey, do you still wish to amend your amendment?
I don't know.
What do you think? Do you think, given what Mr. Malcolm has said, it might be pertinent to withdraw it at this stage, and we try to achieve what you want to achieve via other means?
Yeah, I think it's the safer option to go with, because given the next application that comes up and their viability assessment shows that 10% is the limit, I think we are doing our best at 20%, and I wouldn't want to be robbing money from elsewhere. So yes.
So for purposes of the minutes, you have withdrawn the amendment.
Yes, Chair, I think so. I think it's sensible.
Okay, and Councillor Hogben, are you happy to withdraw your seconding in that capacity?
Well, if he's withdrawn his proposal, I haven't got a lot of choice, have I? Really?
Okay, I just need.
Unless I decide.
I need to ask you. I need to go to you to ask. That's what I'm doing.
Well, I have to accept the inevitable that amendment isn't going to be called. So that doesn't mean to say I accept it, but I see there is no choice in this case.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edgar wishes to make say something, and then I intend to probably go back to the officers before I go to the vote. Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm bearing in mind Mr. Malcolm's comments and advice. I am happy to support that as part of my proposal. Okay,
so I am going to clarify. If there are no further comments, and I've got nothing in the inbox, I'm Sarah.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just check the happy as well with that?
Councillor Groves, are you happy to accept the amendment suggested by Mr. Malcolm and proposed by Councillor Edgar?
I'm more than happy to second the proposal from Mr. Malcolm and also the proposal from Councillor Edgar, Chair, yes.
Thank you very much. Do either officers wish to come back before I go to the vote? Councillor Hogben wishes to speak. I'm going to go to the officers first, Steve, and then I'll come back to you.
As long as they'll clarify exactly what we're going to be voting on.
Yeah, I was going to ask that happens before I went to the vote. So, Mr. Crowther.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify my understanding of where we're at. So I referred at the beginning of my presentation to various additional conditions, certainly from our local flood authority. So there are 3 conditions there that would replace the one condition. And just for clarity, the one condition that's set out in there is condition 10, which is surface water drainage system. So effectively, the 3 conditions that they're recommending would replace that one condition. So we'd end up with 2 extra conditions, if you like. There is also the condition 17, which would include the words signage within that. So it's public rights of way management scheme and signage that would be associated with that. So in effect, those are the sort of amendments to the conditions. There is then the final condition, which again I referenced and we talked about here in terms of the Section 106 agreements. So we would need a condition, as we are the landowner and we are the local authority, we need an extra condition that requires a Section 106 agreement to be entered into by a condition as recommended by our legal colleagues. So, and we'd also, picking up the comments just made now by Mr. Malcolm with regard to a review mechanism. So that would need to be included within the wording of the 106 agreements. That, Chair, I think is all of the amendments picked up that I've got here. Thank you.
Does that satisfy your inquiry, Councillor Hogben? Councillor Hogben, you're on.
Yes.
It does. Okay. Can I just check before I go to the vote that the legal officer believes that what we've done so far is okay, and I can take we have a legal proposition and seconding, and I can go to the vote.
Hi, Councillor Gardner. Yes, you can go to the vote on that now.
Thank you very much. Wrong mouse. Right, I will now invite each member of the board in alphabetical order to confirm their support or otherwise by stating for, against or not voting. Can I please advise councillors Farrell, Morton and Redstone that they must respond not voting because they were absent for part of the debate, but I will call your names in order. Councillor Anthony Critchley.
Against.
Councillor Steve Edgar.
For.
Councillor Ashley Farrell.
Not voting.
Councillor Peter Groves.
For.
Councillor Steve Hogben.
For.
Councillor David Jeffery.
For.
Councillor Rob Morton.
Not voting.
Councillor Patrick Redstone.
Not voting.
Councillor Jackie Wetherall.
For. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Councillor Phil Williams.
For.
I'm also voting for. So that is carried. Thank you very much. It is my intention now to suspend the meeting for 5 minutes for a comfort break. And then when we come back, I will take the member register again before we continue to the next item.
Do you want me to stop sharing, Chairman, or a few more minutes?
Yeah, just a couple of. I'm reading the Emery's letter. Okay, go back, Sarah.
Okay.
Right. I'm going to reconvene the meeting of the Strategic Planning Board of Cheshire East Council. And before I proceed with the next item of business, I intend to call take a roll call of members of the board. Councillor Critchley. We'll come back to Councillor Critchley. Councillor Edgar.
Yes, Chair, I'm back.
Councillor Farrell.
I'm here, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Groves.
I'm here, Chair. Can see and hear you. Thank you.
Councillor Hogben. Councillor Jeffrey.
Hi, Chair. Yeah, I'm here.
Councillor Morton.
Yes, I'm back, Chair.
Councillor Redstone.
Present.
Councillor Weather.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Yes, I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
So Councillor Hogben. Councillor Critchley.
Yep, I'm here, Chair.
Thank you very much. So just Councillor Hogben. So I'll give him a minute and then we'll start. I'm assuming Mr. Crowther is ready because it's his application.
I am indeed, Chair.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Right. Councillor Evans, are you going to be speaking in the next item?
Is he on mute?
Are we on the agenda?
Councillor Evans, we will be on. Right. Yes, you are correct. I just wanted to check that you were there. I will call you once Mr. Crowther has completed his presentation.
Okay, thank you. All right. No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Can I just check? Is Councillor Hogman back with us yet?
System.
I think
Yes, I am. Yeah, this.
Thank you very much. Right.
There's always a delay, but yes, it took me longer to make a cup of tea than I expected. I am back. Hopefully, I suppose it'll be another 2 hours before we can be able to make another one. I'm not predicting.
Well, maybe not. We will see. So if we now move to right, if I get the right mouse and move the right pages. Right. We are now going to move to item 6, planning application 19/2178N November. Outline planning approval for the development of up to 50 residential units. Class C3 close brackets, land reserved for a new primary school, a local centre bracket classes A1 to A4, AA, B1C, C3 and D1 close brackets, and associated infrastructure and open space, land off Minshull New Road and Flowers Lane, Leighton, for Blur Homes and Galliford Tri Partnership. Mr. Crowther, if I can ask you to present this item, please.
Certainly, Chair. Let's just, okay, we seem to already have the presentation to hand, so that's helpful. Okay, so this is, as I think we've already referenced before, this is the second of the 2 applications making up this sort of, if you like, these 2 allocations within the local plan. So this is the larger site, and as the chairman's already introduced, this is 850 houses and various other uses associated with that, including a local centre and a primary school location. So let's just see if I can make the technology work for us a bit better with this one. So you can see here the site edge red. So this is the boundary that runs underneath the pylons at this point. So these are the 2 sort of major cross-country pylons. So this is the sort of the southern, well, I think I've referred to as the southern part of the site, which is the majority of it, if you like. There's then a small parcel that sits south of Flowers Lane, adjacent immediately to the east of Leighton Hospital in here. And then the final parcel of land is this area up here on the sort of northern side of the site. Just for reference, some members of the board may remember they granted approval for an outline application for a site which was then referred to as the Fairfield development, which effectively sits within this plot of land in here. So there is an outline approval and now a submission of a reserve matters application for an application in this area here. And this is the current site of the Blore Homes Parkers Road developments, which is nearing completion, as I understand it. So this is the sort of current site where Blore Homes are building. So I think we kind of know the general environments, but again, I'll repeat, Leighton Hospital here, and then obviously we have Bentley to the south, the edge of Crewe on the eastern boundary here. Again, just for completeness, local plan strategy 4. So this covers, if you like, the big chunk of the site in this area here. So where the marker is moving through. So this is the southern part of the site that wraps around, obviously excludes these areas outside, which are for hospital expansion. So to cover one of the Crewe Town Council's questions in this presentation, this area is not included within the development proposals of the master plan, so it would still be free for the hospital should they have plans to expand into these areas immediately adjacent along these boundaries. So this is local plan strategy 4. The other local plan strategy site sits immediately to the north of that. So this is local plan strategy 5. So this is this area in here. As I've already said, a chunk of this site in here has already got outline permission that was granted approximately 2.5 years ago, and we've got now currently reserve matters in for this area. So that the site that in question then is in this area here. This forms part of the master plan, which I'm going to come on to. So this is all north of Flowers Lane along here. Okay. Again, the highway scheme, so we can see the interconnectivity between the two. So we have the one parcel I've literally just referenced in this area here. We then have the middle parcel that sits this sort of triangle to the east of the hospital, and the remaining then sits here and in this area on the west. And then we have the swathe of land, which I'll come on to in a second, that runs following the sort of direction, if you like, of the pylons. And this shows the road interconnectivity between the things, which has already been approved. Indicative master plan, we've seen this on the previous application. So just to talk you through the main elements of this. You can see the road scheme is superimposed within the centre of that, so it's quite clear how the two link. This then is the pylon that runs through the centre of the site, and you can see here that is effectively meant that this area has become, in effect, a large area of public open space. So it's sort of utilised for various sort of water bodies. Now, some of those are multifunction, some are for drainage purposes, and others are there for sort of wildlife sort of purposes as well. So there's sort of different uses within that. But this swathe of land also acts as a connectivity route. So for those of you know the area well, this is the main Middlewich Road, due north and south. And if you come south through here, it takes you down onto the Nantwich Greenway that comes out at the rising sun, the south of Bentley in effect. So the idea would be that the main cycle route, so I think they call it Connect 2, would come through this area here along Middlewich Road, and there is then the opportunity to come onto the new road network and either follow the road itself, because there are cycleways along the road as approved, or to go through a green route effectively that takes you through the centre of the site here. And obviously that would then provide you with an ideal direct link into Leighton itself, the Leighton Hospital, and avoid you having the need to cycle along Middlewich Road, which for those members are aware is not a great particular road. It's relatively narrow and high speed, so it's not an ideal sort of cycle environment. And obviously the same for cyclists goes for pedestrians, that this will be an interconnectivity here that would open up this area and allows pedestrians just as easily as any cyclists to move through this area. So that's a sort of major feature of this development. We then have here the local centre, and I think you can see the detail better, members, on your pack if you need to look at it in a bit more detail. But the local centre in this area here. We then have the location of a sort of, it's proposed at this stage to be a sort of public house in this area on this busy junction here, which is the Bradfield roundabout. We then have the site for the school at the northern side of the site, which is in this location, and you can see there's a swathe of greenery that sits outside the allocated site here at this point. And here we have various provision for playing fields for the school and areas of public open space within that. And I think if you look in one of the more detailed plans, there's different sorts of provision within that area, but there's no proposal at this stage to have any built form within that swathe. The housing and the school sits within this element of the parcel. And these obviously, again, are the various housing parcels that sit alongside that. So you can see how they link in with the Engine of the North application or economic development we've already looked at. So moving on. So this is a land use parameters plan, if you like, that just sort of builds on that and sets these sort of various parameters. So these are the sort of the residential areas in essence, and you've got these sort of areas of public open space that sort of sway through the middle of that, and it kind of just sets some sort of parameters of how we'd want to see that particular area developed. So picking up on some sort of photographs to sort of give an indication of the area. So this is the southern parcel. So this is the area south of the hospital road, Smithy Lane. So this is looking from sort of not too far from the roundabout at the junction with the Minshull New Road. And this is looking south across the site. You can see the site is relatively flat. The site doesn't start to sort of slope down towards Bentley, which is in this direction here. So Bentley is on the horizon in the distance there. I'm sorry, it's difficult to tell on this slide, but Bentley sits in that area. So this site is pretty much pan flat. And as you can see, the only landscape features really are the hedgerows and some of the trees within that. But large areas of this site are very open. And again, you can see the pylons that run through this area here. Okay. This is looking northeast towards the Smithy Lane, Minshull New Road junction. So this is sitting within the site, looking back in the opposite direction, if you like. And again, you can see there are the odd scattered tree within the site. Interestingly, that whilst these trees are quite mature, that they're not particularly tall, which is quite interesting. I understand that's because of the heavy clay. It sort of stunts their growth effectively within this area. And again, just to sort of highlight that there's the Minshull New Road sort of hedge line, if you like, and Leighton Academy sort of sits just off shot into the right in that direction. This shows this is a photograph on the eastern boundary of the site. So that, again, this is this southern parcel. There's an existing farm which is being retained at this stage of the development, right literally on the eastern boundary, and sort of shows a shot, if you like, of Leighton Hospital in the distance. And there's, you know, the site, and there's the distinctive chimney within the centre of the hospital complex. And again, you can see the site is very open and relatively flat. Just a shot of the pylons, just to give you a sort of a feel for it. But again, this is the sort of swathe through the middle of the site, where the sort of greenway would run effectively, and just gives you an indication of, again, the openness of it and the height of these particular electricity pylons. This is just a shot from outside Leighton Academy on Minshull New Road, again, just showing the hedge line along at that point. You see it's quite a mature hedge, and again, there are some mature oak trees that sit within that. Shot just sort of the ploughed field nature. Again, the odd scattered trees within this area and the pylons in the distance. And here you can see the edge of, I think this is the student nurse accommodation at the edge of Leighton Hospital in the distance. So this is taken effectively from just from a gateway on Minshull New Road itself. Okay, this shot is taken with my back effectively at Bradfield Road. So this is the existing Bloor Homes development on Flowers Lane. So this is the sort of central part of it. This is a sort of triangle, as I referred to it beforehand. And again, you can see that the student nurse accommodation at the edge of Leighton Hospital there, right on the left-hand side of the shot, and again the pylons that cross the road. And this is the site that's allocated. Well, it is shown in the master plan as being the site of a public house. Again, another shot pretty much similar, again showing the whole of this sort of triangle of land. You can see it's a very, very open area of land, and then the hospital in the distance over there. This is Flowers Lane, so this is looking northwest towards sort of the main Middlewich Road in the distance, which you can't quite see, just sort of showing the character of the road through the centre here. And this is being improved as part of the Northwest Crew package. And if you remember from the plans, there are proposals for 2 roundabouts within that road. This then is the most northerly parcel of land. You remember reference where the primary school will be located. So this is the area, again, looking northwest here from Flowers Lane. Flowers Lane runs literally just off shot here. So it would sort of just give you a general indication of sort of the land. Again, very flat, very open, with just a few scattered hedgerows and trees within that. And I think he's referenced in the report, just for completeness, there's a public footpath that runs along the southern boundary of this northern parcel. So effectively, this is the edge of the site. And again, you can see the sort of the character of the area here. You've got the scattered oak trees that sit within that area. I think, yeah, sorry, just one final shot, just again, characteristics of the site, big land just used for sort of general arable use at the moment. I think that's all the photographs. So if I just quickly pan back to one of the layouts, just for while I'm picking up on the other matters. Again, just to highlight some of the matters covered in the conditions, the lead local flood authority have recommended the same 3 conditions. So in terms of the recommendation, that would replace one of the conditions that are listed in the conditions list. There are also, I also need to highlight that there are 2 additional environmental health conditions which are referenced in the report that are not picked up in the conditions. One relates to the need for a lighting scheme, and one that relates to the need for a noise assessment. This is presumably in terms of how one would develop the local centre and the public house in particular. So we need to see how they would interact with any sort of adjacent housing areas. So we need to see how the detail of that was picked up. So those would be matters that would need to be submitted as part of any reserved matters application. Just to pick up a few other sort of housekeeping points. In terms of viability, the numbers that are set out in the report, if you look at, where are we now? Page 69 of the officer's report, the first sort of full paragraph there is reference there to a £2.743 million extra over drainage infrastructure that we were, well, we basically were confused of where this sat within all the numbers that are looked at as part of the viability assessment. Effectively, this is something that Cheshire East Highways have agreed with the developer as a contribution towards infrastructure costs within the road. So this is not a cost of the development per se within each individual parcel. So each of these development parcels covers its own back, if you like, in terms of cost. And so everything within that particular area. There is then a contribution as set out in the report towards the North West Crew package, which is the £5,500 roof tax, as referred to earlier. And this falls, if you like, between the two. So this is a contribution that the developer has agreed to make to Cheshire East Highways, effectively. So when the road is built, there are various infrastructures within that road, in particular drainage. So in other words, the pipes that are in there are sufficient not just to accommodate the water flows for the road, the runoff from the road effectively, it would also accommodate the water flows for the development parcels themselves. Members that know this area will know it's very heavily clay, and so water permeability is a real problem in this area, and hence the highway scheme has been designed to accommodate that flow within the highways proposals itself. Now, the developer as such then would need to contribute to that clearly because it's a cost, and that unfortunately was not accounted for in the viability work because it was not part of the actual sites in question. So when the viability was looked at and concluded as set out in the report, there is some £8.5 million available for sort of other Section 106 contributions. This £2.7 million unfortunately would need to be taken off that particular figure. So the 2.7 million then becomes and from memory, something about £5.8 million. So the actual number, unfortunately, that will be available would not be as high as officers we were hoping to meet other contributions. But that said, the numbers that are set out in the Section 106 table within your reports at page 70 would remain unchanged. So in other words, they would still reflect what's set out in the report. We were hoping that other numbers would be in the mix, but that is not the case, members, unfortunately. Just to highlight, I did check the numbers, and unfortunately the numbers don't actually add up entirely accurately in terms of the overall figures. So those members that have got the calculator out, there is unfortunately by my numbers, there is a 13,086 £86 difference in the numbers in terms of the amount that is available. So what I'd like to do is suggest that when the calculations are done, that there is going to be a slight difference, certainly in either the education or the health contribution when it's finalised, and the difference of that, I said, would be the £13,086 from those particular ones. We also discussed part of the previous application having a review mechanism built into any Section 106 agreement, and certainly in this case, because this is a very sizable site, 850 houses, we feel it is entirely appropriate here to have a review mechanism built into any Section 106 agreement, and that's something that we would be recommending in this particular case as well, for those reasons. If you just bear with me a second, members. See if there's any other matters I've missed up on. Yeah, just for clarification, in terms of trees, again, something that was debated in the previous application, we would want to see an updated hedgerow and tree impact assessment to look at the detail in terms of which trees can be retained as part of any reserve matters application. There is a reference in the conditions set out at page 71, which references submission of an NAIA, which is an arboricultural impact assessment at the reserve matters stage, and the tree and hedgerow protection plan. And we'd obviously want to incorporate within those conditions the need to update any reference to retention of trees. And obviously we will, mentioned in the previous debate, we would want to see as many of those trees and hedgerows retained as possible as part of any layout. And clearly it's something that we'll be looking very closely at as part of any reserve matters application. And one final point with regard to the ecology. There's reference at condition 25 reserve matters application supported by an updated badger survey. I've also missed out in regard to barn owls. That barn owl survey would also need to be updated, so that condition at 25 would also need to include reference to an updated barn owl survey. That, members, hopefully is all the matters. Sorry, there are a lot of matters in this regard, but I think that's everything I've got in my notes here. So thank you for that, Chair, and I'll try and exit this particular presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crowther. I am now going to go to the ward councillor, Councillor Evans. Members who were not present for the first part of the meeting might not be aware, but Councillor Evans is in a setting where he is required to wear a mask at the moment, and so therefore you might wish to increase the volume on your laptop so you can hear him when he speaks. So Councillor Evans, would you like to turn on your microphone so you can speak to us now, please? And you have 5 minutes like you had before.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, a lot of the arguments have been cried out on the first application we just looked at. But I will say again that
Councillor Evans, yes? Can you please, I appreciate that, but can you please ensure that you speak about all of the items you wish to raise? Don't assume that everybody was present earlier. There are two councillors. Okay, rightio, thank you.
Thank you very much for that help. Yes, well, I will get on first of all to the roads, which again I believe are going to be very congested. The map I want to have a look at is on page 73, and in particular, none of the roads are really going to have any extra lanes or other works apart from more roundabouts, perhaps some realigning. I'm very concerned about Barrows Green. On page 73, it's about halfway along the page, and this it looks like it's like a tree put there, but that is a particular roundabout, which can lead to a lot of congestions, probably more so because reference is made to Bentley motors and the facilities and extra problems that they will create by blocking off Tim's Lane, but also the hospital is also extending its car park onto Flowers Lane, so there's going to be even more and more traffic. And I still can't believe that our road capacity, especially on Bradfield Road, can actually take that amount of traffic. Now, if I can go back then, the other thing is that I'm a bit concerned about Section 106 agreements and where that money actually goes. I noticed that you've got indoor recreation on page 70, £149,000+ now, is that going to be for facilities that could be put in this area, or is it just going to be disappear into, well, I'm not quite sure whether it's going to be for crew, for the swims, or the libraries, or what. So I think that's very concerning, especially as within the ward itself, and it's quite large. There's over 2,000 properties there at the moment, so this will increase it by probably another 1,000. And so, because there's house building already going on, which you may want to be aware of, it's going to mean that there isn't a building in that area where a meeting could take place. It's been a source of frustration, as mentioned by the parish council, about having somewhere central to this whole population, so that they can meet for meetings and other recreation purposes. So I would like to try and see if monies that's going to be allocated for indoor leisure can be made sure that the agreement 106 is for indoor recreation in the ward. And in particular, I gather that there's a move to try and fund from the parish precepts some monies as well to build something that could be used for all the community. Just give me a minute there. Sorry about that there. Yeah, the social housing is there again. It's Cheshire East has even said itself that they're not very happy at all. Whether 30% provision is being provided on page 46. So again, that's another big issue. So there are many other points, of course, that have been raised and will be raised. So I'll leave my discussion at that point. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions for Councillor Byron, please? No one has indicated so in the chat box. In that case, thank you very much, Councillor Byron. Will you please turn off your microphone? Okay. I'm now going to call upon the agent for the applicant to address the board. Mr. Howman, you have 3 minutes speaking time. And if I can ask you to switch your microphone and your camera on, and you may be asked questions of clarification after you finish speaking.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. This is a strategic scale application being brought forward by two major house builders in line with the provisions of the local plan. The North West Crewe sites collectively form a cornerstone of that plan strategy and are crucial to ensuring a continuing supply of housing land within the borough. As you've heard earlier, this is a holistic proposal where we've worked very closely with the adjoining landowners and also the key infrastructure provider, which is Cheshire East, which is playing a central role in enabling the large-scale Northwest Crewe improvement package to come forward, which is necessary to serve this large growth area. The council's road scheme is consented, funded and ready to start next spring. And this application, together with the one which you have recently, earlier in this meeting, approved, will contribute and enable the road scheme to proceed. And that road scheme will deliver not just benefits in terms of opening up the housing land, but also importantly improve access, including emergency access to Leighton Hospital, and also improve access to the Bentley Motors complex, obviously a key employer within the borough. The new neighbourhood at Leighton West will achieve a very high standard of urban design, placemaking and environmental credentials. It will be a great place to live and relax with a range of different house types and tenures on almost 40 acres of new green open space, together with supporting services in the form of a local centre and provision for a new primary school. The scheme, as you've seen, planned and a comprehensive approach has been adopted with further detail to be fleshed out in the reserve matters process. Members, this application is the culmination of many years of detailed work and wide consultation with developers, the council and the wider community. The Crewe package, the infrastructure package, has been, I think, nearly 10 years in design and planning and is finally on the cusp of its implementation, unlocking this next stage in Crewe's ambitious growth plan. The scale of the highway works and the contributions required of the developers has unsurprisingly put significant pressure on scheme viability. However, I can confirm the overall proposal has been very rigorously tested and is deliverable and viable at the scale of 106 contributions and affordable housing presented in the officer's report as explained by Mr. Crowther. As your consultants have pointed out, any further demands placed upon it would threaten that viability and put at risk its implementation, which would be disastrous for the planned road improvements and the ability for that scheme to start and proceed next spring. In conclusion, Chairman, I hope members will welcome this very substantial scale of investment in Crewe that the proposal and, of course, the associated infrastructure package represents, and support our application. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Howman. Are there any questions for Mr. Howman on matters of items that he's addressed in his statement? Unless it's a problem with I'm not indicating any. So thank you very much, Mr. Howman. If you could please turn off your camera and hold on. So no, Councillor Red's, Mr. Howman, can you turn back on? I think there might be a delay. Councillor Williams would like to ask you a question. Councillor Williams.
Yes, there was a slight delay. Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. I just got a query on the holistic side again. You've talked about sort of consultation with the landowners. I'd like a little bit more information, please, on consultation with the hospital, particularly in relation to the parking, additional parking on Flowers Lane that was mentioned by Councillor Evans. I just wondered whether that's been factored in, or whether we can expect people visiting the hospital to park on adjacent streets surrounding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Yes, the detailed conversations and meetings took place with the hospital trust before the application was evolved, and indeed those conversations continue. There is a steering group which meets every month that has been convened by the council that brings together my developer clients, the council, the highways department, Bentley Motors representative, and the hospital trust. So this is a very open and transparent dialogue that's taken place and indeed continues. In terms of the hospital's additional car parking, that's on land which is outside this application site, but which is owned by my landowner clients, and was made available to the hospital because they wanted more on-site parking, and we facilitated that, and it's good to see that that is going ahead. So clearly that will assist in ensuring that the hospital can look after its own parking requirements. And there is, as Mr. Crowther pointed out, further land available immediately wrapping around the hospital, which is reserved in the local plan for hospital-related uses. That's land which is excluded from this application. And if the hospital finds it needs further land for parking or indeed any other purposes associated with its operations, then I anticipate again they'll come and talk to us, and we'll be happy to have that conversation. I hope that helps.
Councillor Williams, does that address your question?
Yes, thank you. Yes, okay. It does.
Councillor Farrell also wishes to ask a question. Councillor Farrell.
Hello. Yeah, sorry, there's always a bit of delay when I'm turning the camera on. Hiya. Gary, is it? I just wanted to go through the viability assessment, really. I don't know whether you've got the table that we've got in front of us. This is on page 68 of the officer's report. Just want to go through firstly the GDV on the affordable housing. Is that sum based on the assumption of 10% affordable housing? So you've got so just for everyone, that's the GDV on the affordable housing on your own assessment has come through as 7,190,000, and is that based on the assumption of 10% affordable housing delivery?
Councillor, thank you. I preface this by saying I'm not a viability expert, and so I'll help you as best I can. Obviously, the summary table which you're referring to is a product of the council having taken independent expert viability advice from two different firms of consultants. So, and it's reflecting the position that's been agreed following that independent assessment. But my understanding, to try and help as much as I can, is yes, you're right that the GDV, which yet another acronym we're dealing with here, stands for gross development value. So that reflects the level of receipts, capital receipts or value that will be created by the affordable housing element of the scheme. In other words, the housing that would be sold at a discount to market value. That's my understanding of what that figure represents, Councillor, yes, at 10%.
Yeah, just to come back on that, I did specifically mention the applicant ballot tables, not the independent reviewers, because I understand that's not fair to you. So that is based on 10% delivery. So 10% of 850 is 85 houses. So does that mean that you're going to be selling those affordable houses for an average of what, £84,000?
I'm not sure if I can answer that, to be absolutely honest. I think that would also reflect the fact that we're not just talking about the housing for sale here, but also the subsidy that you need to put in to ensure that 65% of the housing which is proposed to be affordable is going to be housing for rent. That's a requirement. The council wants it to be rented predominantly rather than housing for sale. So I think this would be, if you like, the level of subsidy required to deliver the affordable housing percentage, both in terms of the amount which is rental and the amount which is it.
Okay. Also on this, on the bit further down on the benchmark land value, if you compare the applicant you're representing against the first reviewer, the first independent reviewer, and also the second. £189,000 over the land value they suggest, the two independent reviewers.
Well, I think that the point is that the benchmark land value within all three scenarios, that's the two independent reviewers and the applicant's submitted viability assessment, are extremely close. They're within a sort of a very small percentage in terms of what one would normally expect to see the margins on these type of assessments. So they are very, very close. I've seen them much further apart than that. But if I might just say, the important thing isn't necessarily what my client's submitted assessment said, which is the first column. It's what the council's two independent appraisers found and what they've based their advice on. And we know that the third column, which is headed RM, which is the final independent assessor for the council, on which the officers have based their recommendation, has set out what it considers to be a fair figure there, which is just over the £10 million mark. And it's that's been used to form the basis of the recommendation. So in a sense, it doesn't really matter too much what our figure was. It's what the council's advisors were prepared to sign off on.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Can't hear you, Chair.
Sorry, is that all, Councillor Farrell?
Yes, that's great, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. There are no further questions, so Mr. Howman, thank you very much for your time. If you could both turn your cameras off, please, that would be very helpful. Right. Do the officers wish to respond to either of the public speakers before I ask for questions from members?
Chair, if I can just pick up on one of the comments from Councillor Evans in terms of the contribution to indoor sports.
Yes.
There was reference in there. The figure given in there is obviously from my colleagues in the leisure department, should we call it? I'm not sure whether it's actually ANSWER in this particular case. I have a feeling it was a gentleman who no longer works for us, but he worked with in the council's remit, the council as a whole, as opposed to ANSWER. He's reflecting in our local sports policy within the local plan, which requires contributions towards indoor sports. As I understand it, that contribution would be to crew. So that sum that's included within there, and I forget the exact figure now, but that will be a contribution to crew. How that would actually be spent in crew, I'm afraid I don't know the details of that, but it would be sort of ring fenced to the local area. Now, whether that could be spent in terms of a more localised facility, I wouldn't want to comment because I don't have that level of detail before me, I'm afraid, today. But obviously there would need to be an indoor sports facility to spend that money on. And certainly in the Leighton area, I don't profess to know the area perfectly, but I'm not aware of any indoor sports facilities in that particular area. I'm sure Councillor Evans maybe could, one of the other councillors can pick me up on that. Maybe Councillor Councillor Hogburn. I'm aware that Bentley have some indoor sports facilities, but they're not council run. So I'm not aware of any facilities within this immediate local area that could be spent on. So it would be in Crewe in general. So hopefully that helps with that regard to that particular answer, but that's specific to indoor sport. It's not a contribution to, you know, local to if you like, just general recreational facilities, which would be picked up in the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm aware that Mr. Hurdus wants to come in. So Mr. Hurdus.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to come back on a couple of points that Councillor Evans raised there in the public speaking. He did reference Barrows Green, the Barrows Green roundabout, which I think members will know fairly well who live locally. I know it very well myself. He's right in the fact that it's not being made larger, but that doesn't mean it's not being improved. The operation is being improved by removing one of the arms. So at the moment it's a 4-arm roundabout for vehicular access. It will become a 3-arm roundabout, but Smithy Lane won't have vehicular traffic on it anymore. It will just be a pedestrian and cyclist access. So it's not being made larger, Barrows Green, but it will work better because there'll only be 3 arms for vehicular traffic on it. So I just wanted to make that point. In relation to Pims Lane, the closure has happened, as I'm sure most of us will know. It happened on, I think, Monday morning. So it has been closed now for non-Bentley traffic. And that was modelled as part of the assessment process for this application in terms of the traffic impact. So that was done. And now it has happened, has been closed to general traffic, but that was modelled at the time of the assessment of the impact of these applications. And I think sort of the third point was about the new access onto Flowers Lane, which is going to serve the car park extension for the hospital. The answer to that is it wasn't modelled as part of the assessment for this application because it wasn't known about it at the time when this application was submitted and the modelling work was done. However, the applicant, i.e. the hospital, has had to do their own modelling in terms of the impact of their additional access onto Flowers Lane. So that's been provided, we've assessed that, and we're happy with the impact of that new egress access onto Flowers Lane based on the implementation of the general highway works in that area. So it has been assessed by the hospital, but not by this applicant, which is quite proper in this instance, given the timescales.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurdus. Are there any questions for officers before we go to the debate? Councillor Hogburn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a bit messy for me using the chat at times because it's on a different screen. Anyway, my question's about it's on page 69. And it's at the top. It's part of the discussion about viability and all that. It states they, which I suppose is the developers, include a figure for extra or over drainage infrastructure at 2.7 million, which they feel should be included in the amount taken, excuse me, from the 8.5 million available. And it said it referred to an ongoing discussion. Because officers feel this sum should be treated as a build cost in the viability assessment. Is that and then it says if it could therefore be available to split between education and the NHS. Can you just it says there members will need to be updated and the final figure in the section 106 confirmed at that stage. Could Mr. Crowther just sort of remind us about that? I'm pretty sure he touched on it in his presentation. Probably some sort of clawback arrangement or some, but could Mr. Crowther come back on that, please, to say where it's up to, if that's possible, public.
Mr. Crowther?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Certainly, Councillor. I did touch on it at the beginning of my presentation. Effectively, there are 3 levels of costs. I think I referred to it in my presentation. So the viability assessment, when it looked at all the costs associated with the development in question, looked at each of the individual parcels of land. So in other words, each of these parcels that I introduced as part of the presentation, and looked at the total build costs for each of those parcels. That included all infrastructure costs, the roads, the sewers, and actually the construction of the houses and associated works that go with that. So that the viability looks at that as a total package. There is then a level of costs associated with the actual Northwest Crew package. So this is the roof tax we've talked about. So this is the £5,500 per house. And in addition to that, so if you like, the third item in terms of cost for construction is one of infrastructure costs within the road itself. So this is an agreement, a private agreement effectively, that Cheshire East Council have with the developer to provide infrastructure within the road, and I refer to the sewers and in particular the drainage because of the nature of the soil types on this site. So that they've reached an agreement for a cost, and this is the £2.743 million, to introduce all of the infrastructure within the road itself, which is an extra cost over and above the £5,500 per plot. So if you like, there are three separate categories, and the important thing was I didn't know until very late in the day, unfortunately, members, where that fitted in terms of the costings. And 11th hour discussions with the consultants who did the latest viability works confirmed they did not include that as part of their viability work. So in other words, when they looked at the costs of each of those individual parcels, there was not an allowance for this £2.7 million. So those of you who the viability assessment as part of the application will see there's a figure at the end of that for some £8.5 million as being available, in addition to the 10% affordable housing as recommended, that would be available for expenditure on 106 matters. However, because that £2.7 million was not included within that, that would need to be taken off that because it is a cost to the scheme. It is, in other words, to implement this development, they need to provide all these connections into the sewers and so on. So it's accepted by both parties that sum of money would need to be taken off that, if you like, £8.5 million, which takes us down to, and I forget the exact numbers, members, so don't quote me on it, but some sort of 5.5 million, whatever comes out of at the bottom of that. So effectively, it was just seeking clarification from that because it was unclear to me as an officer where this number fell and which pot it was allocated to. So to reiterate the point I've made already, it unfortunately needs to come off that amount. So unfortunately, there isn't any more money available for the Section 106 as referenced in the report, which clearly is not where we were hoping to be at, but unfortunately that's the reality of the viability. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Crowther. Thank you.
I think you're on mute, Chairman.
Sorry. Are there any other questions for officers? I can see nothing in the chat box or in by way of hands. In their case, I intend to go open the debate, and I understand that Councillor Critchley, you are the nearest member. Do you wish to speak on this item, or have I now moved you too far north?
No, I think I am the nearest actually, but I'm more than happy for somebody else to start a debate.
Okay. Are there any indication of who would like to start the debate? Other crew members or those members on? Okay, Councillor Farrell, if you'd like to begin.
Hey now, yeah. This sorry, I'm just really stuck on this. Obviously, it's 10% affordable housing. This is 850 houses. What the biggest housing scheme I've been involved on the strategic planning board by a fair margin. To say we can only supply 10% of all the housing on the biggest scheme that I've been involved in on the strategic planning board, I think is something going wrong there. If you can supply 30% affordable housing on much smaller schemes, but you can't do it on the larger scheme, then there's something clearly going wrong. The officer mentioned that the land is pan flat. It's ideal for building on. There's no substantial groundwork no substantial landscaping that needs to be done to rectify it by some massive slope or anything like that. It's just there to be, developed on. I think that some of the maths is arguable, to be honest, on the appraisals between the first reviewer and then the second reviewer. The valuation on the affordable housing seems to fluctuate quite a lot between the applicant, the primary reviewer, and then the secondary reviewer. The 20% GDV that we're granting them, that seems a lot. We've had developments here before where we've gone down as far, I think, down to like 12% GDV, 13%. So we're granting them 20%. If we even brought that down to 15%, that's an extra $7.5 million. Well, yeah, about $7.5 million that could go towards granting, increasing the affordable housing allocation. So I don't understand why it has to be 20%. You can 20% on, 20% on an 850 house scheme. That's incredible. It's a ridiculous amount of money. 30 odd million off their own calculations. So I think I wouldn't be in favour of supporting this outline planning. I want to do outline planning permission and saying, oh, you only have to submit 10% on the outline before we've had the details, because they'll come back on. No doubt they'll come if we give a ceiling there 10% on the outline. No doubt they'll come back on reserved matters and say, oh, these things now. We'll have to bring it down even further. And it's better to set your stall out higher and then negotiate it down and say, we'll come down straight away, and then when you come back at the reserved matters, we'll let us dig away at the affordable housing even more. I just think we can move numbers around here. To sum up, we can move numbers around there. We can see if the willing to come down 10% down to maybe 15 or 13% and see what we can do there. I just think we can do better. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hogben and then Councillor Edgar.
Yeah, I mean, in his presentation, Mr. Holman said this was the culmination, excuse me, of many years of discussion and the like, and certainly the first big developments up in that part of Crewe were approved around some of them in about October 2011, so that's 9 years ago. There were some large ones which have probably been built now, well on the way to being built. So yes, it's been a long time in the making, but I have to say, frankly, if I was not that happy about the shortfall on the educational contribution on the last one, which was a couple of £100,000 short of what education say they need, on this one, frankly, education saying that the contribution that they really require, which by previous definition publicly was what they see as essential, roughly speaking, £3.7 million, and what is available through this, where is it now, £700,000, so £3 million shortfall straight away. And as to the NHS contribution, they would seek £1 million, and what's available is £86,000. All right, and I accept what Mr. Holman said, that there were the landowners made some land available for car parking. And to be quite honest with you, it's the report states the contributions are not fully compliant. I'd say they're nowhere near policy compliant. And frankly, as it stands, I'm not voting in favour of this application. I like I think the comment that Councillor Farrell came up with, is to do with the viability assessment, is pretty central to this. And actually, in view of there were some earlier comments I made that, well, maybe we as members, the decision-making members, need to have a clear appreciation of how these viability assessments work. I mean, questions were asked earlier on of Mr. Holman, and he said himself, he's not an expert, so we haven't had the answers to those questions anyway. I think I'll leave it there. There's a lot of planning has gone into that, the master plan and things like that. But at the end of the day,